He rescues people for cash. This time, the desert might demand more. Outlaw Badge. A modern noir western thriller of gold, greed, and desert justice. Chapter 1. The heat came off the Sorrel's dry lake in waves you could see. Marcus Ryan drove his F-250 straight down the middle of it, the white crust crunching under the tires like bone china at a yard sale. The speedometer held steady at 45. Any faster, and the diesel would overheat. Any slower, and he'd cook in the cab like a TV dinner nobody wanted to eat. He had the windows down. The AC died in Barstow, along with his last shred of optimism about getting the truck serviced before Vegas. The air that blew through the cab felt like standing in front of a commercial oven, set to broil. It dried the sweat off his face before the moisture had a chance to do any good. The glove box held $10,000 in hundreds, rubber banded into 5 bricks. Payment for services rendered. He'd pulled a senator's daughter out of a compound in Kingman, where she'd been living with 12 other people who thought the end times were coming next Tuesday. She'd called him every name in the book during the 6-hour drive back to Phoenix. Her father had paid in cash and told Marcus to disappear for a while. Vegas seemed like a good place to disappear. Low stakes, high anonymity, and enough distance from Arizona to matter. The radio crackled static. No stations out here. Just the hiss of empty frequencies, and the occasional trucker calling for a tow on CB Channel 19. Marcus reached over and killed it. The silence that rushed in to fill the space was bigger than the static. It was the silence of a place where nothing lived, except the things tough enough to handle being cooked alive on a daily basis. He saw the car at 11:15 by the dashboard clock. It sat in the middle of the salt flat like a dropped toy. Small. Silver. Definitely not moving. Marcus eased off the gas. The truck slowed to 30, then 20. He reached under the seat and pulled out the Glock 19. 15 rounds in the mag, 1 in the pipe. He set it on the bench seat next to him and steered with his left hand. The car was a Nissan Sentra. Rental plates. California. Enterprise sticker in the rear window. He circled it once at 50 yards. The car didn't have anyone hiding behind it. The doors were closed. The windows were up. That was the first bad sign. Windows up in the Mojave in June meant the AC was running or the driver was dead. The engine had quit running. Marcus could see that from the lack of exhaust shimmer. He pulled up alongside. Shut off the diesel. The ticking of the cooling engine sounded loud in the emptiness. He took the Glock. Stepped out. The heat hit him like a physical thing. A wall. A fist. He put his hand up to shade his eyes and immediately regretted it. The white salt threw the sun back at you from every direction. Sunglasses helped. Squinting helped more. He approached the Sentra from the rear quarter. Gun down, but ready. He cleared the back seat through the window. Empty. Just a rolling suitcase and a purse. The driver's seat had someone in it. A woman. Slumped over the steering wheel. Brown hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose. She wore a white blouse and khaki pants. Office clothes. Teacher clothes. The kind of outfit you wore to a parent-teacher conference in Columbus, not to a salt flat in California. Marcus tapped the window with the barrel of the Glock. The woman didn't move. He tried the door. Unlocked. He pulled it open, and the heat that rolled out was a different quality than the ambient oven outside. This was wet heat. Human heat. The smell of someone who'd been baking in their own humidity for hours. He holstered the gun. Touched her shoulder. "Ma'am." She jerked. Not a full startle. Just a twitch. A sign of life clinging to the wiring, despite the system shutting down. She turned her head. Her eyes found him. They were brown. Bloodshot. The whites had gone pink from burst capillaries. "Water," she said. The word came out as a croak. Marcus went back to his truck. He grabbed the gallon jug from behind the seat. It was warm, but it was wet. He brought it back. "Slow," he told her. "If you chug it, you'll throw up." She took the jug with both hands. Her fingers shook. She raised it to her mouth and drank. Water spilled down her chin, soaking into the collar of her blouse. She swallowed 3 times before Marcus pulled the jug away. "Wait," he said. "Give it a minute." She leaned back in the seat. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. She looked at him. Her eyes focused. "I ran out of gas," she said. "I can see that." The fuel gauge was pegged on E. The odometer showed 247 miles. A Sentra could do 300 on a tank. She'd driven it dry and then some. "Where were you going?" "North," she said. "Toward Ridgecrest." "You're about 40 miles south of Ridgecrest. And 10 miles off the highway." She looked out the windshield at the white expanse. "I followed the GPS. It said this was a shortcut." GPS doesn't know the difference between a paved road and an alkali flat. Especially out here. The satellites get confused by the heat shimmer. He handed her the water jug again. "Small sips. You drink too fast, your stomach will reject it." She obeyed. 3 sips. She capped the jug and handed it back. "How long have you been out here?" Marcus asked. "Since yesterday afternoon. The car died around 4. I tried to walk back to the highway. I got about a mile before I realized I'd die before I made it. So you came back to the car and waited. I thought someone would come." "Nobody comes out here," Marcus said. "This route is a local thing. Miners. Prospectors. People who don't want to be found." "I'm looking for my husband," she said. Marcus had heard that line before. He'd heard it in Vegas. In Reno. In Tucson. Women looking for husbands who'd left to find themselves, or a fortune, or a reason to keep breathing. The desert collected men who needed to disappear. It also collected the women who came searching for them. "Join the club," Marcus said. "Half the women in Nevada are looking for husbands." She reached into the purse on the passenger seat. She pulled out a phone. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. The battery indicator showed 5%. She swiped through the photos. Held the phone up. The man in the photo was smiling. Mid-30s. Broad shoulders. He wore a reflective safety vest over a flannel shirt. Hard hat pushed back on his head. The kind of guy who built houses for a living and liked it. "David Navarro," she said. "He's my husband. We've been married 6 years." Marcus studied the photo. The man had the look of someone who'd never been punched in a bar fight. Clean. Open. The kind of face that believed other people when they said they'd pay you back on Friday. "He came out here 3 months ago," she said. "Gold prospecting. He bought a claim near the Granite Mountains. He wrote me. Said he found something. Said he'd send for me. And then nothing." The call stopped. The text stopped. "I filed a missing person report in Columbus. They said he's an adult. He can go where he wants. I flew out here to find him." Marcus handed the phone back. "I'm heading to Vegas. I can take you to Ridgecrest. You can file a report there. Local sheriff might actually look for him." "No police." "Why not?" "Because if David wanted the police involved, he would have called them. He came out here for a reason. If I bring cops, it'll ruin everything he's been working for." Marcus looked at the car. The rental agreement was clipped to the visor. Enterprise. Picked up at LAX 4 days ago. Due back yesterday. Lady, your husband is either dead, drunk, or rich. If he's dead, the cops find the body. If he's drunk, the cops find him in a holding cell. If he's rich, he doesn't need you." She turned in the seat. Her eyes locked onto his. They held no plea. They were hard. Determined. "I'm not going to the police," she said. "I'm going to find him. With or without your help. You got a vehicle problem. Without my help, you die on this salt flat before sundown. Then help me." "Why would I do that?" She reached into her purse again. Pulled out a wallet. She opened it and took out a stack of bills. 20s. Hundreds. Everything she had. $2,000, she said. "That's all I have left. Take me to the Granite Mountains. Help me find my husband. The money is yours." Marcus looked at the cash. He looked at the woman. She was dehydrated, sunburned, and stubborn. The combination was usually fatal in the desert. But she was still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. He thought about the 10,000 in his glove box. He thought about Vegas. He thought about disappearing into a city where nobody asked questions and nobody cared about the answers. Then he thought about the look in her eyes. The desperation. The refusal to quit, even when quitting was the only smart option. He'd seen that look before. In Iraq. In Afghanistan. In the mirror, every morning when he tried to shave without thinking about the things he'd done to earn the money in his glove box. "Get your stuff," Marcus said. "You'll help me? I'll drive you to the mountains. After that, we'll see." She grabbed the suitcase from the back seat. The purse. A plastic shopping bag with bottles of water and granola bars. Marcus popped the Sentra's hood. He pulled the air filter. Desert dust had caked it solid. The engine had been sucking grit for the last 100 miles. Even if she'd had gas, the car was done. He walked back to the F-250. Opened the passenger door. "Get in. The cab is hot, but it's better than what you've been sitting in." She climbed in. He went around to the driver's side. Started the diesel. It turned over with a cough and a rattle that said the engine had another 100,000 miles left if he was lucky, and 50,000 if he drove it like he stole it. He put the truck in gear. Swung it around. Headed north, back toward the highway that would take them to Ridgecrest, and then to the mountains where men went to find gold and ended up finding something else. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus Ryan." "I'm Elena. Elena Navarro." "I know. I read the rental agreement." She looked at him. "You always read other people's rental agreements?" "I always check to see who I'm rescuing before I rescue them. Makes it easier to know if I'm wasting my time." "Am I wasting your time?" Marcus thought about that. He thought about the money. He thought about the husband with the trusting face. He thought about the desert and what it did to trusting people. "Ask me again when we get to the mountains," he said. They drove in silence. The salt flat gave way to gravel. The gravel gave way to dirt. The dirt connected to a paved two-lane that had once been smooth, but now buckled in sections where the heat had expanded the asphalt beyond the capacity of the roadbed to hold it. Elena drank water. Small sips. She ate a granola bar that had melted in the heat and reformed into something that looked like a protein brick. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For stopping. Most people would have driven past. Most people don't drive through the salt flats. The ones who do are usually running from something. Or towards something. Either way, they don't stop for stranded cars. But you did." "I'm having a moment of weakness. It'll pass." She almost smiled. "Is that what you call helping people? Weakness?" "I call it bad judgment." "Same thing." The highway straightened out. The mountains appeared on the horizon. Not the granites. Just the foothills. The granites were another 50 miles northeast. Past Ridgecrest. Past the last gas station. Past the place where cell service gave up, and GPS started guessing. "Tell me about your husband," Marcus said. "What do you want to know?" "Why he came out here." Most people who go prospecting either have experience or delusions. Which one was he? Neither. He was desperate. She told him. The construction business in Columbus. The houses they'd built. The crash in 2008. The foreclosure. The bankruptcy. The years of trying to rebuild with nothing but a hammer and a willingness to work for half what he was worth. He tried, she said. For 6 years he tried. But the work dried up. The calls stopped coming. He went from building custom homes to fixing decks for cash under the table. He hated it. So he came west. He read an article about people making money prospecting old claims. Small operations. A guy with a pickaxe and a pan can still find gold if he knows where to look. David thought, if he could find enough, we could start over. Not get rich. Just get clear. How much is enough? 50,000. That was his number. Enough to pay off the debts. Enough to buy tools. Enough to rent a shop and start bidding on jobs again. 50,000 in gold is a lot of digging. He didn't care. He just wanted to work. He wanted to build something that mattered. Marcus knew the type. Men who defined themselves by what they made. When they couldn't make anything, they went looking for raw materials. Some found them. Most found excuses. "You think he's alive?" Marcus asked. Elena stared out the window at the desert rolling past. Creosote bushes. Joshua trees. Rocks that looked like they'd been dropped from orbit and left to bake. "I think if he was dead, I'd feel it," she said. "We've been together since college. I know him. I'd know." Marcus didn't argue. He'd seen people operate on intuition before. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it got them killed. The desert didn't care which. They passed a sign, Ridgecrest 23 miles. "We'll stop for gas," Marcus said. "You can clean up. Get some real food. Then we head into the mountains." "You believe me?" "I believe you're paying me. That's enough." She turned in the seat. "You don't believe David is alive." "I believe the desert eats people. Good people. Bad people. It doesn't care. Your husband came out here with hope and a pickaxe. 3 months later, he's silent. That's not a good sign. But you'll help me look. I'll drive you to the last place he was seen. After that, you're on your own. $2,000 buys transportation, not miracles." She absorbed that. She went back to looking out the window. Marcus drove. The mountains grew larger. The sun dropped toward the western ridge, turning the sky into a gradient of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if it didn't signal the temperature about to plummet 40 degrees once darkness hit. He thought about the husband, the smiling contractor with the safety vest and the dream of rebuilding a life. He thought about the kind of man who named his truck Bessie and believed other people when they said they had a good claim to work. Men like that died in the desert. Not because they were weak. Because they were trusting. And trust was a luxury the Mojave couldn't afford to honor. But he didn't tell Elena that. She'd figure it out on her own. Probably when they found the body. If they found the body. The desert was good at keeping secrets. Sometimes it kept them forever. Chapter 2. The gas station in Ridgecrest had 4 pumps and a convenience store that sold beef jerky in 17 varieties. Marcus filled the F-250's tank while Elena went inside to use the bathroom. He watched the numbers climb on the diesel pump. $70. 80. The truck took everything he gave it and wanted more. A kid came out of the store. 16, maybe 17. Baggy shorts and a Lakers jersey. He stopped to stare at the F-250. That thing run on regular? The kid asked. Diesel, Marcus said. How many miles per gallon? Enough to get me where I'm going. The kid processed that. Decided Marcus didn't want to talk. Went back inside. Elena emerged 10 minutes later. She'd washed her face, pulled her hair back into a fresh ponytail, changed into jeans and a t-shirt from her suitcase. The office clothes were probably in a trash can somewhere in the women's room. She looked more like someone who belonged in the desert now. Less like a teacher. More like a woman who'd made a decision and intended to see it through regardless of the cost. Marcus topped off the tank. $92. He paid cash inside. The clerk was reading a magazine about bass fishing and didn't look up. Back in the truck, Elena had spread a map across the dashboard. Not a phone map. An actual paper thing from the gas station rack. California Road Atlas. She'd folded it to show the area northeast of Ridgecrest. Highway 395 runs north, she said. We take it to the China Lake turnoff. Then east on Trona Road. Marcus started the engine. You navigate before. I taught geography. Middle school. Before the budget cuts. They cut geography. They cut everything that didn't involve standardized tests. Geography. Art. Music. I got reassigned to special ed. Then the school closed. Now I help autistic kids learn to read. 4 hours a week. $15 an hour. She said it matter of fact. No self-pity. Just the arithmetic of a life that had subtracted more than it added. Marcus pulled out of the gas station. Turned north on 395. The highway was empty. 2 lanes of cracked asphalt running through a landscape that looked like God had given up halfway through creation and moved on to something more interesting. Tell me more about your husband, Marcus said. What do you want to know? Start with why he thought gold prospecting was a better option than staying in Ohio. Elena traced a line on the map with her finger, following the route they were driving. We tried to stay, she said. After the foreclosure. David worked construction jobs when he could find them. Framing. Drywall. Day labor at Home Depot loading trucks. He hated it. Not because it was hard work. He liked hard work. He hated that it didn't lead anywhere. Most work doesn't. His did. Before the crash. He built 3 houses from the ground up. Custom homes. He'd show me the blueprints. Walk me through every decision. Why he put the kitchen here. Why the master bedroom faced south. He loved the planning. The problem solving. Then the market collapsed. Then everything collapsed. We lost the business. Lost the house. Lost the savings. We moved into a rental. 1 bedroom. David couldn't sleep. He'd sit up at night, reading articles about people who'd reinvented themselves. Started over. Marcus knew where this was going. He'd seen it before. Men who couldn't accept failure. Who needed to believe there was a way back from zero if they just tried hard enough. That's when he found the gold thing, Marcus said. That's when he found hope, Elena corrected. There's a difference. She pulled out her phone. The battery was at 3%. She swiped through photos. Stopped on one. Held it up. The photo showed David standing next to an F-150. Blue. 10 years old. Rust on the wheel wells. The truck bed was loaded with equipment. Pickaxe. Shovel. A plastic bin with supplies. David was smiling. Same smile from the earlier photo. But this time it reached his eyes. He bought the truck with money from his last job, Elena said. Remodeling a lawyer's bathroom. The lawyer paid in cash. David took half and put it into the truck. Took the other half and bought a mining claim online. BLM land. 20 acres near the Granite Mountains. How much did the claim cost? $800. Plus fees. The website said the area had historical gold deposits. Small scale. Nothing commercial. But enough for a determined individual to make a living. The website lied. Maybe. Or maybe David got unlucky. He drove out here in March. Sent me texts every day. Photos of the desert. The mountains. He was excited. She swiped through more photos. Desert landscapes. Sunset over rock formations. A campsite with a tent and a Coleman stove. Then the texts. Marcus read them over her shoulder. March 15th, made it to Ridgecrest. Truck running great. Weather perfect. Miss you already. March 17th, found the claim. It's beautiful. You can see for 50 miles. Can't wait to bring you here. March 20th, met a guy at the gas station. Says he knows the area. Offered to show me the good spots. Feels like a sign. March 22nd, we hit a quartz vein today. Partner says it looks promising. Could be the real thing. The text stopped on March 24th. One line, found it. Real gold. Building our future. Love you. Marcus handed the phone back. That's the last one? That's it. I called. No answer. I texted. Nothing. I waited a week. Then another week. I thought maybe he lost his phone. Or broke it. Or the battery died and he couldn't charge it. You didn't think he was dead. I didn't want to think he was dead. There's a difference. She swiped past the text. Stopped on another photo. David and Elena together. Christmas. They were standing in front of a tree. David had his arm around her. Both smiling. Both looking like people who believed tomorrow would be better than today. We were happy, Elena said. Before everything fell apart. We had plans. We were going to buy a house. Have kids. Build a life. Then the crash happened and the plans evaporated. But we still had each other. We could rebuild. As long as we were together. So why did he leave? Because he couldn't stand being the reason we failed. He blamed himself. For the business. For the foreclosure. For not being able to provide. He needed to fix it. To prove he could. Marcus drove. The highway cut through the desert in a straight line. The mountains grew closer. Purple in the distance. Jagged and hostile. You blame yourself too, Marcus said. Elena looked at him. What makes you say that? You're out here. Driving a rental car into a salt flat. Spending your last $2,000 on a search that will probably end with a body. That's not just love. That's guilt. She went back to looking at the map. Her finger traced the line northeast. Past Ridgecrest. Past the towns. Into the blank spaces where the cartographer had given up trying to name things. I told him not to go, she said. Her voice was quiet. Controlled. The night before he left. We had a fight. I told him it was stupid. That prospecting was for desperate people with nothing to lose. That we still had each other. That was enough. What did he say? He said it wasn't enough for him. He needed to build something. To prove he could. He kissed me on the forehead. Told me he loved me. Left before sunrise. She closed the map. Folded it. Put it in the door pocket. I didn't kiss him back, she said. He walked out and I didn't kiss him back. I was angry. I wanted him to feel bad for leaving. Marcus understood guilt. He carried enough of it to recognize the weight in someone else's voice. So you came out here to apologize. I came out here to bring him home. What if he doesn't want to come home? She turned in the seat. Her eyes locked onto his. Then I'll ask him why. Face to face. Not through texts. Not through silence. I need to hear him say it. That we're done. That he's moving on. That I should stop waiting. Marcus respected that. He didn't agree with it. But he respected it. They drove for another 20 minutes. The landscape changed. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills. Joshua trees appeared. Twisted. Ancient. They looked like they were trying to escape the ground, but couldn't quite manage it. Elena pulled something from her purse. A piece of paper. She unfolded it. This is what I have, she said. It's not much. Marcus glanced at it. A credit card receipt. Chevron. Ridgecrest. Date, March 22nd. Total, $47.83. On the back, someone had drawn a map. Pencil. Rough lines. A squiggle for a road. A circle for a town. An X in a box canyon. Next to the X, follow the dog. Turn at the tungsten mine. 3 miles past the cattle guard. David drew this, Elena said. He sent me a photo of it. Said this was how to find the claim, if I needed to. Marcus studied the map. It told him almost nothing. Just directions that assumed you knew where to start. Which most people didn't. The dog, Marcus said. You mentioned that. It's a ridge formation. Looks like a sleeping dog from the valley. David said, every prospector in the area uses it as a landmark. Do you know what it looks like? No. But you probably do. Marcus did. He'd been through the granites before. Search and rescue work. Hikers who got lost. Climbers who fell. He knew the formations. Knew the ridges. Knew the places where people went to find something, and ended up losing themselves instead. I know it, Marcus said. It's about 40 miles northeast. Past the old tungsten operations. The road gets rough. 4-wheel drive only. Your truck can handle it. My truck can handle it. The question is whether you can. I can handle anything if it gets me to David. Marcus didn't argue. She'd find out soon enough what the desert could do to hope. How it ground it down into something smaller. Something manageable. Something that fit in the palm of your hand like a worry stone. They passed a sign, China Lake Naval Weapons Station, no trespassing. Military base, Marcus said. They test weapons here. Missiles. Drones. You hear explosions sometimes. Don't worry about them. I grew up in Ohio. The only explosions we had were fireworks on the 4th of July. This is different. These are the kind of explosions that make craters. She absorbed that. Went back to the map. Marcus turned east on Trona Road. The pavement deteriorated immediately. Potholes. Cracks. Sections where the asphalt had given up entirely and reverted to gravel. The truck bounced. Elena grabbed the oh shit handle above the door. How long? She asked. To the mountains? 2 hours. To the claim? Depends on the road. Could be 3. Could be 5 if we get stuck. Will we get stuck? Depends on whether your husband's directions are accurate. A lot can change in 3 months. Washes flood. Roads get blocked. Landmarks disappear. Elena stared out the window. The desert rolled past. Rock and scrub and emptiness. He's out there, she said. It sounded like she was trying to convince herself. He's working the claim. He lost track of time. Or his phone died, and he couldn't get to town to replace it. There's a logical explanation. Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned that some questions were better left unanswered. Let her believe what she needed to believe. The desert would correct her soon enough. They drove deeper into the emptiness. The sun dropped lower. The temperature inside the cab started to fall. The desert operated on extremes. Oven during the day. Freezer at night. Nothing in between. Marcus thought about the map. The crude drawing. The vague directions. Follow the dog. Turn at the tungsten mine. 3 miles past the cattle guard. It was the kind of map a man drew when he assumed the person reading it already knew where they were going. Or when he didn't expect anyone to need it. Did David know you were coming? Marcus asked. What? The map. Did he know you'd need to find him? Or was this just in case? Elena thought about that. He said it was in case of emergency. If something happened, and I needed to get to him fast. What kind of emergency? He didn't say. I thought maybe medical. Or legal. Something where time mattered. Marcus absorbed that. An emergency map. Directions for worst-case scenarios. The kind of thing a man drew when he knew he was walking into something uncertain. Something that might go wrong. Your husband, Marcus said. Was he the cautious type? He measured twice and cut once. Why? Because cautious people don't prospect alone. They bring backup. They tell people where they're going. They check in regularly. He was checking in. Until he wasn't. Right. Which means something changed. Either he found what he was looking for, and got too busy to call. Or he found something else. Like what? Like trouble. Elena went quiet. She stared at the map in her hands. At the pencil lines that were supposed to lead her to her husband. To answers. To closure. Marcus hoped she found what she was looking for. But he'd been doing this long enough to know that the desert rarely gave you what you wanted. It gave you what you needed. Which was usually harder. Usually sharper. Usually something that cut deep and left scars. The road narrowed. The gravel turned to dirt. The dirt turned to sand. Marcus shifted into 4-wheel drive. The truck clawed forward. Chapter 3. The sun was dropping behind the Panamint Range when Marcus spotted the building. It sat alone on a stretch of desert where nothing else stood for 20 miles in any direction. Concrete block construction. Flat roof. 2 gas pumps that looked like they'd been installed during the Carter administration and never serviced since. A sign hung crooked above the door. Tomas's Gas and Supply. Underneath, hand-painted in red, if we don't got it, you don't need it. Marcus pulled off the road. Gravel crunched under the tires. 2 dogs lifted their heads from the dirt near the entrance. One was a shepherd mix. The other was indeterminate. Both looked at the F-250 with the kind of interest that lasted exactly 3 seconds before their heads dropped back down. A security camera was mounted above the door. The lens was dusty. The red light that should indicate recording was dark. Marcus gave it 50-50 odds on whether it actually worked. He killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was different than the highway silence. This was the silence of a place where human voices were rare enough to be remarkable. Elena opened her door. Stepped out. She'd been quiet for the last hour. Processing. Marcus recognized the pattern. She was preparing herself for information she didn't want to hear. The door to the building opened. A man stepped out. He was 60, maybe older. Hard to tell with desert people. The sun aged them in dog years. He wore Carhartt work pants and a button-down shirt with the sleeves cut off. His arms were brown and ropey. His face was the color of old leather. His eyes were pale blue, faded like denim left in the sun too long. He didn't say anything. Just stood there, one hand resting on the doorframe. Waiting. Marcus walked to the door. Elena followed. "You open?" Marcus asked. "Pumps work," the man said. His voice was rough. "Smokers gravel. Stores open till dark. After that, you're on your own. We need information more than gas." The man's eyes shifted to Elena. Back to Marcus. "Information costs more than gas." "How much more?" "Depends on the question." Marcus respected that. Straightforward commerce. No pretense. "We're looking for someone," Marcus said. "Man came through here about 3 months ago. Name's David Navarro." The man's expression didn't change. "Lots of people come through." Elena stepped forward. She pulled out her phone. Swiped to David's photo. Held it up. "This is my husband," she said. "He was prospecting near the Granite Mountains. He bought supplies. March 22nd. Please. Have you seen him?" The man squinted at the photo. His face gave nothing away. He could have been looking at a picture of the president or a pile of rocks. Same expression. "Maybe," he said. "Can't say for certain." Marcus reached into his wallet. Pulled out a 50. Set it on the concrete step between them. "Try harder," Marcus said. The man looked at the 50. Looked at Marcus. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not friendly. Just appreciative of the directness. He picked up the bill. Folded it. Put it in his shirt pocket. "Yeah," he said. "I remember him. Polite fella. Said thank you when I gave him change. That's rare out here." Elena's breath caught. When did you see him?" 3 months back. Like you said. March. Bought a bunch of supplies. Pickaxe. Couple shovels. 50 pounds of rice. Case of water. Box of dynamite." "Dynamite?" Marcus asked. "For blasting. Mining. You want to move rock fast, you use explosives." Had to show me his permit. BLM requires it for commercial operations. He had a permit? Showed me the paperwork. Everything legal. Paid cash. $473. Elena pulled out a small notebook. Flipped through it. Found what she was looking for. "He withdrew $500 from our checking account on March 21st, she said. "The ATM in Ridgecrest. This matches." The man nodded. "Sounds right." "Was he alone?" Elena asked. The man's expression shifted. Just slightly. A tightening around the eyes that said the next part was the part Marcus had been waiting for. "Came in alone," the man said. "Left with a guy." Marcus felt it. The confirmation of what he'd suspected since Elena showed him the map. David Navarro hadn't been prospecting alone. He'd partnered up. "What guy?" Marcus asked. The man pulled a pack of Marlboros from his pocket. Shook one out. Lit it with a butane lighter. Took a drag. Exhaled. "Goes by Cole," the man said. "Don't know his last name." "Don't ask. He's been coming through here on and off for maybe 10 years. Always the same story. Says he's got a claim. Says he knows where to find color. Hangs around for a few days, bumming smokes, watching the road." "Watching for what?" "Partners. Greenhorns. People with money and equipment. He waits for them to show up. Then he offers to help. Show them the ropes. Split the take." Elena's face went pale. "David met him here." "Your husband pulled up in his truck. Blue F-150. Looked new to the desert. Clean. Cole was sitting right there. The man pointed to a bench made from a 2x10, nailed between two cinder blocks. He walked over before your husband even got out. Started talking. Friendly. Helpful. Your husband ate it up. What did Cole look like? Marcus asked. 50, maybe 55. Average height. Thick through the shoulders. Drives a Silverado. Nevada plates. Wears his gun cross-draw. Carries a boot knife. Marcus filed that away. Armed. Experienced. Predatory. He was here a week before David showed up. Elena asked. About that. Maybe longer. He'll camp out by the old airstrip. Come in for coffee. Smoke. Watch the road. He's patient. I'll give him that. And when David showed up, Cole lit up like Christmas morning. I could see it. Your husband was exactly what Cole was waiting for. Soft hands. City clothes. Truck full of new equipment. Money in his pocket. Cole probably spotted him from a mile away. Elena turned away. Her hand went to her mouth. She was processing. Connecting dots she didn't want to connect. Marcus stayed focused on the man. You didn't warn him. The man took another drag. I sell supplies, friend. I don't sell advice. People make their own choices. Your husband wanted a partner. Cole wanted a stake. They made a deal. What kind of deal? Cole said he knew where to find gold. Up in the granites. Past the old tungsten operations. Said there was a quartz vein that assays high. Said all it needed was someone willing to dig. Your husband said he was willing. And you just let them go. The man's eyes hardened. I'm not a babysitter. I'm not their daddy. Two grown men make an agreement. That's their business. I take their money. I give them supplies. I wish them luck. What happens after they leave is between them and the desert. Marcus understood the logic. Didn't agree with it. But understood it. Elena turned back. Her eyes were wet, but she hadn't cried. Her voice was steady. Where did they go? Cole said the granites. Up past the tungsten mine. Forest Service Route 41. Four-wheel drive only. Cole's been up there before. Knows the area. Has he been back? Marcus asked. The man's expression shifted again. This time, it was calculation. Weighing how much to say. Marcus pulled out another 50. Set it on the step. The man looked at it. Looked at Marcus. Picked it up. Yeah, the man said. He's been back. 3-4 times. Comes down every few weeks. Buys supplies. Cigarettes. Beer. Pays cash. Always in a hurry. Doesn't talk much. When was the last time? Week ago. Maybe 10 days. Bought gas. Bottle of Jim Beam. Box of shells for his .45. Did he mention David? Elena asked. Said his partner was working the claim. Said they hit a good vein. Said he was heading back up with supplies. Elena gripped the edge of the concrete step. Her knuckles went white. He's alive. David's alive. The man took another drag. Didn't confirm. Didn't deny. Marcus saw the truth in the silence. The man didn't believe David was alive. He'd seen this before. Cole and his rotating cast of partners. Men who went into the mountains together and came back alone. Cole been through before? Marcus asked. With other partners? The man nodded. Every couple years. Different guy each time. Same story. They find gold. They work the claim. Partner leaves after a while. Goes to town. Files paperwork. Cole stays up there. Says he prefers it. And you never see the partners again. I never see the partners again. Marcus and the man locked eyes. They both knew what that meant. They both knew the arithmetic. Elena saw the look. She saw the calculation. "No," she said. "David's alive. Cole said he was working the claim. He's up there. He's fine." The man crushed his cigarette under his boot. "Ma'am, I hope you're right. I truly do. But you should know something about Cole before you go looking." "What?" "He doesn't like sharing. Never has. He'll partner up when he needs labor. When he needs someone to dig, or carry, or work the machinery. But once the gold shows up, Cole's math changes. He starts thinking about how much easier life would be without a partner." Elena's face went from pale to gray. "You think he hurt David?" "I think Cole's been doing this a long time. And I've never seen one of his partners come back down the mountain." The silence that followed was thick. Even the dogs sensed it. They lifted their heads, looked at the humans, decided nothing interesting was happening, went back to sleep. Marcus pulled out his wallet again. This time he took out 320s. Set them on the step. "We need supplies," Marcus said. "Water, food, rope, and a topographic map if you have one." The man picked up the bills. "I got what you need. Come inside." He led them into the store. It was dim, cool. Shelves stocked with canned goods, motor oil, and ammunition. A cooler hummed in the corner. The floor was concrete, swept clean. The man pulled a map from behind the counter. USGS quadrangle. Granite Mountains. He spread it on the counter. "Forest Service Route 41, he said. His finger traced a line northeast from the highway. Runs about 15 miles into the range. Ends at an old tungsten mine. After that, it's hiking. Or ATV if you got one." "We don't," Marcus said. "Then you hike. About 3 miles past the mine, there's a box canyon. Spring-fed. That's where Cole takes his partners. Says there's gold in the quartz up there. Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. But that's where they go." Elena studied the map. "How hard is the road?" "4-wheel drive required. High clearance. Lots of washboards. Some sections washed out. You'll be doing 10, maybe 15 miles per hour. 3 hours if you're lucky. 5 if you get stuck." Marcus folded the map. "We'll take it. And a case of water. Box of MREs if you have them. Got military surplus. $20 each. I'll take 6. The man gathered the supplies. Marcus paid. $400 total. Elena bought beef jerky and a carton of cigarettes. She didn't smoke. Marcus figured they were for trade. Smart. As they loaded the truck, the man came out. Handed Marcus a scrap of paper. "My number," the man said. "Cell service is spotty up there. Non-existent past mile marker 10. But if you get a signal, call. Let me know what you find." "Why do you care?" Marcus asked. The man looked at Elena. Back to Marcus. "Because I've sold supplies to 6 men who went up that road with Cole Brennan. Your husband makes 7. None of them came back down. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe I should have warned them. But I didn't. I took their money and I let them go." He crushed another cigarette under his boot. "So now I'm telling you. Cole Brennan is a predator. He finds desperate men. He offers them hope. Then he takes everything they have. If your husband is up there, he's either working as Cole's slave, or he's buried in a hole somewhere Cole won't tell you about." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "What should we do?" "Bring a gun," the man said. "And don't trust anything Cole tells you. He's a liar. And he's good at it." Marcus started the truck. The man watched them pull out. He stood in the doorway, until they were out of sight. Then he went back inside. The last light was fading from the sky. The stars were coming out, bright and cold and indifferent. Marcus turned north on Forest Service Route 41. The pavement ended after 100 yards. Gravel started, then dirt, then rocks. Elena held the map. Her hands shook. 6 men, she said. None of them came back. 7, if you count David. I'm counting David. Marcus drove. The headlights cut through the darkness. Dust rose behind them. The road got rougher. We might not find him alive, Marcus said. I know. We might not find him at all. I know. Are you ready for that? Elena looked at him. Her eyes were hard, dry, determined. I'm ready to know the truth, she said. Whatever it is. I'm done with silence. I'm done with questions. I need to see. I need to know. Marcus respected that. He shifted into low range. The truck climbed. They were heading into the mountains. Into the dark. Into the place where Cole Brennan took his partners and came back alone. The road narrowed. The rocks got bigger. The truck's headlights illuminated a sign, Forest Service Route 41. High clearance vehicles only. Beyond the sign, the road disappeared into shadow. Marcus drove forward. The darkness swallowed them whole. Chapter 4. The road stopped being a road around mile marker 5. Marcus kept driving anyway. The F-250 crawled over boulders that scraped the undercarriage with sounds like fingernails on sheet metal. The headlights bounced with each impact. Rocks, potholes, washouts where rain had carved channels through the dirt and left behind geological puzzles the truck had to solve in real time. Elena gripped the handle above the passenger door. She hadn't said anything for 20 minutes. Just held on and watched the darkness beyond the windshield. Marcus stayed in low range. First gear. 10 miles per hour when the terrain allowed it. 5 when it didn't. The diesel worked hard. The temperature gauge climbed toward the red line, then dropped back when the grade flattened. The GPS had stopped working at mile 3. The signal couldn't find enough satellites through the canyon walls. The screen showed a blue dot frozen in place, surrounded by blank space. Marcus navigated by the USGS map spread across Elena's lap. Topographic lines. Elevation markers. The squiggly line that represented Forest Service Route 41 as it existed on paper, not as it existed in reality. At mile marker 7, the headlights caught metal. Marcus hit the brakes. The truck stopped. Dust settled. There, Elena said. The F-150 sat off the side of the road, backed into a clearing between 2 Joshua trees. Blue. 10 years old. Rust on the wheel wells. Nevada plates. The same truck from the photo Elena had shown him. Marcus killed the headlights. Darkness rushed in. He waited 30 seconds. Let his eyes adjust. Looked for movement. Heat signatures. Anything that suggested they weren't alone. Nothing. He turned the headlights back on. Stay here. No. Elena. That's my husband's truck. I'm not staying in the car. Marcus didn't argue. He reached under the seat. Found the Remington 870. 12 gauge. 7 shells in the tube. 1 in the chamber. He worked the pump. Clack clack. The sound was loud in the enclosed cab. He stepped out. The cold hit him immediately. Desert night. The temperature had dropped 40 degrees since sunset. His breath came out in white clouds. Elena got out on her side. She carried her phone. The screen was dark. Dead battery. Marcus approached the F-150 from the rear quarter. Shotgun up. Ready. The truck was empty. Doors unlocked. Keys hanging from the ignition. The driver's window was down. Dust had blown in and settled on the dashboard in a fine layer. Marcus opened the door. The dome light didn't come on. Battery dead. He used his own flashlight. LED. Bright white beam. The interior was clean. Organized. A thermos in the cup holder. Maps in the door pocket. The registration was clipped to the visor. Marcus flipped it down. David Michael Navarro. 2847 Maple Street, Columbus, Ohio 43215. The glove box held the owner's manual, a tire pressure gauge, a pack of gum, and a wallet. Marcus took the wallet, opened it. Driver's license. David Navarro. Organ donor. 36 years old. Brown eyes. 6 feet tall. 180 pounds. Credit cards. Visa. MasterCard. Discover. A receipt from Tomas's Gas and Supply. March 22nd. Total. $847.23. Payment method, cash, Visa declined. And a photo. Tucked behind the license. David and Elena. Same photo she'd shown him earlier. Wedding. They were young. Smiling. They had their arms around each other, like they were holding onto something they never wanted to let go. Marcus. Elena stood beside him. She was staring at the wallet in his hands. He gave it to her. She opened it. Found the photo. Her fingers traced the edge. She didn't cry. She just stood there in the cold, holding a picture of her husband from a time when things were different. Marcus searched the rest of the cab. Center console. Empty, except for a notebook. He pulled it out. Spiral bound. Water stained. The pages were filled with handwriting. Neat. Precise. Carpenter's script. Measured lines. Everything level. Marcus flipped to the first entry. March 15th, made it to Ridgecrest. Truck runs good. Tank is half full. Motel is cheap. Tomorrow, I find the claim. March 17th, BLM office was helpful. Claim is registered. 20 acres. Section 14, Township 26S, Range 42E. Old tungsten operation nearby. History of quartz veins with visible gold. This could work. March 20th. Met a man at the gas station. Cole. Says he's been prospecting here for years. Knows the area. Offered to show me around. Seems like a good guy. Honest. Direct. We talked for 3 hours. He's experienced. I'm lucky. Marcus flipped forward. The entries continued. Daily updates. Weather. Progress. Observations about the desert. References to Elena. I miss her. I can't wait to bring her here. She'll love the stars. Then June 12th, found the trace. Quartz vein in a canyon wall. Cole says it looks promising. He's seen formations like this before. We marked it. Tomorrow we dig test holes. June 14th, truck overheating. Coolant leak. Can't fix it here. Left it at the road. We'll carry the gear on foot. Cole knows a shortcut. 3 miles. Says there's a spring where we can set up a permanent camp. June 16th, spring is beautiful. Cold water. Clear. We set up the tent. Built a fire ring. Cole is good at this. He's done it before. He knows what he's doing. I'm learning. June 18th, dug a test shaft. 4 feet down. Hit the quartz. Cole brought the samples to the spring. Crushed them. We panned the powder. Color showed up. Not a lot. But real. Actual gold. June 20th, we found it. The vein is richer than we thought. Visible gold in the quartz. Flakes. Small nuggets. Cole says this could be the real thing. We need to blast to get at it properly. Tomorrow, we set charges. I can finally build the house. I can bring Elena here. Everything is going to work out. The entry stopped. Marcus flipped through the remaining pages. Blank. Nothing written after June 20th. 3 months ago. He closed the notebook. Handed it to Elena. She read. Flipped pages. Her expression went from hope to confusion to something darker. Realization. He stopped writing, she said. On June 20th. The same day he texted you. Why would he stop? Marcus didn't answer. He already knew why. Men stopped writing when they stopped having control over their own schedules. When someone else decided what they did and when they did it. Or when they stopped doing anything at all. Elena closed the notebook. Held it against her chest. We need to keep going, she said. Marcus checked the bed of the truck. Empty. Swept clean. Whatever gear David had brought was gone. Carried away. Either by David or by someone else. The trail goes on foot from here, Marcus said. We can't drive any further. The road washes out about 50 yards ahead. How do you know? I can see it. He pointed. Beyond the truck, the headlights illuminated a section where the road simply stopped. A washout. Flash flood had carved a gap 8 feet deep. No way across without a bulldozer. Then we walk, Elena said. Marcus went back to the F-250. Grabbed his pack. Water. MREs. The topographic map. Extra shells for the shotgun. A coil of rope. Elena grabbed her own pack. Lighter. Just water and the beef jerky she'd bought from Tomas. Marcus handed her a flashlight. Turn it off when you're not using it. Save the batteries. How far? According to the map, about 2 miles to the box canyon. Another mile to the spring. How long? 2 hours. Maybe 3. The terrain gets rough. They started walking. The road became a trail. The trail became a suggestion. Rocks. Loose gravel. Sections where water had carved channels and left behind obstacles. Marcus led. Shotgun slung over his shoulder. Flashlight in his left hand. Eyes on the ground. Elena followed. She was breathing hard. Not used to altitude. Not used to hiking in the dark. But she kept pace. They walked for an hour. The canyon walls closed in. The stars above narrowed to a strip. The temperature kept dropping. Marcus stopped. Ahead, in the beam of his flashlight, something stood out from the natural chaos of the desert. A pile of rocks. Stacked. Geometric. Deliberate. Marcus approached. Elena came up beside him. The cairn was 4 feet high. Each stone had been selected for fit. Flat sides out. Corners interlocked. The top stone was smooth. Rounded. Balanced perfectly on the peak. It was beautiful in its precision. Someone had spent time here. Had cared about making something that lasted. Elena reached out. Touched one of the stones. David built this, she said. How do you know? Because he was a craftsman. He never did anything sloppy. Every joint had to be tight. Every corner had to be square. This is his work. Marcus examined the cairn from different angles. It didn't just mark the trail. It pointed. The structure was angled. Oriented. The long axis aimed north toward a gap in the ridge. He's marking the route, Marcus said. Showing the way to the spring. To the camp. Elena walked around the cairn. She counted the stones. 37. He counted them. Odd numbers. He always liked odd numbers. Said they were more honest than even ones. He knew you'd come. He was leaving me breadcrumbs. In case something went wrong. Marcus followed the line the cairn indicated. The gap in the ridge was visible in the moonlight. A V shape. Dark. The trail climbed toward it. 2 more miles, Marcus said. That's where the spring is. Where Cole took him. Elena pulled out the wedding photo. The one from David's wallet. She tucked it into her jacket pocket. Against her heart. Let's go, she said. They climbed. The trail steepened. Marcus's calves burned. His lungs worked harder in the thin air. Behind him, Elena stumbled twice. Caught herself both times. Kept climbing. The gap grew closer. The walls narrowed. The wind funneled through, constant and cold. Marcus stopped at a switchback. Listened. Water. Faint. The sound of a spring somewhere ahead. Trickling over rocks. Pooling. Moving. And something else. Smoke. He smelled it before he saw it. Wood smoke. Pine. The scent of a campfire burning somewhere in the canyon ahead. Someone was up there. Living. Working. Waiting. Elena smelled it too. David. Marcus didn't answer. He worked the pump on the shotgun. Chambered a fresh shell. The old one ejected. He caught it. Pocketed it. Loaded the fresh one. 7 in the tube. 1 in the chamber. Stay behind me, Marcus said. From here on, we assume nothing is friendly. They moved forward. The trail curved. The gap opened up into a box canyon. Walls on 3 sides. A single way in. And at the far end, visible in the moonlight, a tent. A campfire. Smoke rising. The camp was occupied. Marcus raised the shotgun. Approached from the side. Using the rocks for cover. Someone moved near the fire. A shadow. Man-shaped. Tall. Thick through the shoulders. The shadow bent down. Poked the fire with a stick. Sparks rose. Marcus got closer. 20 yards. 15. The man stood. Turned toward the trail. Like he knew someone was coming. His face caught the firelight. Not David Navarro. Older. Harder. Eyes that reflected the flames like a predator's. Cole Brennan. He smiled. Took you long enough, Cole said. His voice carried across the canyon. Calm. Confident. I've been expecting you. Chapter 5. Cole Brennan stood by the fire with his hands in his pockets. Relaxed. Casual. Like he was greeting neighbors who dropped by for coffee. Marcus kept the shotgun leveled at center mass. 15 yards. Close enough that buckshot wouldn't spread. Far enough to have reaction time if Cole moved wrong. Put your hands where I can see them, Marcus said. Cole smiled. He pulled his hands out slowly. Showed his palms. Empty. Easy, friend. I'm not looking for trouble. Where's David Navarro? Who's asking? Elena stepped out from behind Marcus. Into the firelight. Her face was pale. Tight. She'd been preparing for this moment since Tomas's gas station. I'm asking, Elena said. I'm his wife. Cole's expression shifted. Surprise. Then recognition. Then something that might have been sympathy if it came from someone else. On Cole's face it looked like a mask. Mrs. Navarro, Cole said. David talked about you. Every night. Said you were the prettiest thing in Ohio. Where is he? Cole gestured toward the tent. Working the claim. He's in the mine. Been there since sundown. We rotate shifts. I work nights. He works days. Keeps the operation going 24/7. I want to see him. He's underground. Can't just pull him out mid-shift. Tunnel's unstable. You interrupt his work, the whole thing could collapse. Marcus didn't lower the shotgun. We'll wait. Suit yourself. Cole sat down on a log near the fire. Reached for a coffee pot sitting on a flat rock. Poured himself a cup in a tin mug. Coffee. It's fresh. No. Cole shrugged. Drank. Steam rose from the mug. He looked comfortable. At home. A man who owned the space around him. Marcus studied the camp. The tent was canvas. Military surplus. Set up on a wooden platform. The construction was good. Level. Squared corners. Someone who knew carpentry had built it. The fire ring was neat. Stones placed in a perfect circle. Firewood stacked by size. Tools arranged on a tarp. Pickaxe. Shovel. Gold pan. Everything organized. David's work. The same precision as the cairn. But there were other signs. A Silverado, parked 30 yards away. Nevada plates. Mud on the tires. Fresh. Recent driving. Empty beer cans lined up on a rock. A cigarette pack crushed and tossed near the fire. Cole's additions. How long have you been partnered with David? Marcus asked. 3 months. Give or take. Since March. Met him at the gas station. He had equipment. I had experience. Made sense to team up. And you've been working this claim the whole time. More or less. Had to go to town a few times. Supplies. Equipment repairs. But yeah. We've been productive. Elena moved closer to the fire. David stopped calling me. Stopped texting. Why? Cell service up here is non-existent. You saw that coming in. We're in a canyon. Surrounded by rock. Satellites can't find us. Neither can towers. He could have driven to town. He's been busy. Focused. When a man finds gold, Mrs. Navarro, everything else becomes background noise. Even the people he loves. That doesn't sound like David. Cole drank more coffee. People change. The desert changes them. Your husband came out here soft. City soft. He's harder now. Tougher. He's becoming the man he needs to be. Marcus watched Cole's hands. The way he held the mug. Relaxed. No tension. But his eyes were different. They tracked everything. Elena's position. Marcus's finger on the trigger. The distance to the Silverado. Cole was calculating. Planning. Waiting for an opening. I want to see the mine, Marcus said. Be my guest. It's 100 yards that way. Cole pointed into the darkness. Follow the trail. You'll see the entrance. Timber short. Can't miss it. You're coming with us. I'm having my coffee. Marcus raised the shotgun. Aimed at Cole's chest. You're coming with us. Cole's smile faded. His eyes went flat. Cold. The mask slipped for half a second. Underneath was something predatory. Calculating. Then the smile came back. All right, Cole said. He stood. Slow. Deliberate. But I'm telling you now. You go down there, you interrupt his work. David's not going to be happy. He takes his mining seriously. They walked. Cole led. Marcus followed 5 paces back. Shotgun up. Elena walked beside Marcus. Her flashlight illuminated the trail. The mine entrance appeared after 70 yards. A black square cut into the hillside. Timber supports. Recent construction. The wood was fresh. Unweathered. A lantern sat just inside the entrance. Cole picked it up. lit it with a butane lighter. The flame caught. Yellow light pushed back the shadows. "After you," Marcus said. Cole walked into the tunnel. Marcus and Elena followed. The air inside was cool, damp. It smelled of earth and rock dust. The tunnel went back 20 feet. The walls were rough, pickaxe marks visible in the stone. The floor sloped down. At the end, the tunnel opened into a small chamber, 8 feet by 8 feet. A pile of tailings in one corner. Tools leaning against the wall. A case of dynamite. Blasting caps. Fuse wire. But no David. Elena spun. Her flashlight swept the chamber. "Where is he?" Cole set the lantern down. "Must have finished early. Probably back at camp. We must have passed each other in the dark." Marcus knew a lie when he heard one. The chamber was empty. Dust on the floor showed footprints. 2 sets. One going in. One coming out. But they were old. Days old. Maybe weeks. No fresh disturbance. Nobody had been working this mine recently. "Try again," Marcus said. Cole's expression hardened. "I told you. He's at camp. Or he went for water. There's a spring about half a mile north. He fills the canteens every morning. It's midnight. Time gets slippery up here. Maybe he lost track." Elena's voice shook. "Where's my husband?" Cole turned to face her. His eyes reflected the lantern light. "Your husband made a choice, Mrs. Navarro. He chose this. He chose the gold. He chose to stay. You need to accept that. He would have told me. Maybe he didn't want to hurt you. Maybe he thought it was easier to just disappear. Let you move on. Start over." Marcus stepped between them. "We're going back to camp. You're going to show us everything. Every supply cache. Every tent. Every piece of equipment. And you're going to tell us the truth about where David is." Cole's smile returned. But it was different now. Sharper. "Or what? You'll shoot me? Out here? No witnesses? No law. You'll become what you're accusing me of being." "I'll take that risk." They walked back to camp. Cole moved with deliberate slowness, making them wait, testing Marcus's patience. At the fire, Cole sat down, poured more coffee. "He's not here. I told you. He's working. Or he's at the spring. Or he's taking a walk. The man likes to walk. Clears his head." Elena's control broke. "Stop lying." She lunged at Cole. He caught her wrist. Twisted. She gasped. Dropped to one knee. Marcus was on him instantly. Pressed the shotgun barrel against Cole's temple. "Let her go." Cole released Elena's wrist. Raised his hands. "She attacked me. I defended myself. Do it again, and I'll paint this canyon with your brains." Elena backed away. Rubbed her wrist. Her eyes were wet but angry. "You're lying. David isn't here. He hasn't been here. Tell me the truth." Cole looked at the fire. At Elena. At Marcus. His expression was unreadable. "All right," Cole said. "You want the truth. Here it is. David left." "When?" "Month ago. Maybe longer. Time runs together. He got discouraged. Said the gold wasn't enough. Said he missed you. Said he was going to Los Angeles. Find work. Start over." "You're lying." "I'm telling you what happened." He packed his gear. Took his share of the gold dust we'd panned. Said he was heading for the coast. I haven't seen him since. Marcus knelt by Cole's pack. Opened it. Inside clothes, food, ammunition. And at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, something heavy. Marcus pulled it out. Unfolded the cloth. A belt. Leather. Tooled. Expensive. With a silver buckle. Oval. Engraved. E+D. Elena's initials and David's. She'd given him that belt. Their anniversary. 2 years ago. David wore it every day. Never took it off. He said it was his luck. Marcus held it up. If David left, why do you have his belt? Cole's face went blank. He gave it to me. As payment. For guiding him. For showing him the claim. He gave you his wedding gift. Men value things differently out here. Sentiment is expensive. Silver spends better. Elena took the belt. Held it. Her fingers traced the initials. She looked at Cole. Her voice was ice. You're wearing his life, she said. Where is he? Cole stood. Faced Marcus. The shotgun was still pointed at him, but he didn't seem to care. You want to know where he is? Figure it out. You're the tracker. You found the cairn. You found the truck. You found the mine. Keep looking. Maybe you'll find him. Maybe you won't. But you're not getting answers from me. Not without a warrant. Not without a badge. And definitely not with that shotgun. He turned. Walked toward his Silverado. Marcus tracked him with the shotgun. Stop. Or what? You'll shoot an unarmed man in the back. Over a belt. Over speculation. You got nothing. No body. No crime. Just a missing person who probably doesn't want to be found. He reached the truck. Opened the door. I'm going to town, Cole said. I suggest you do the same. Before you freeze to death up here. Or worse. He climbed in. Started the engine. Backed out. Turned. Drove down the trail. The tail lights disappeared into the darkness. Marcus lowered the shotgun. Elena stood by the fire. Holding the belt. Staring at the place where Cole had been. He killed him, she said. He killed David, and he's wearing his belt. Marcus didn't argue. The evidence pointed that way. But evidence and proof were different things. And without a body, they had nothing that would hold up in court. We need to search, Marcus said. The mine. The camp. The surrounding area. David's here somewhere. Or evidence of what happened to him. Elena wrapped the belt around her hand. Then let's search. They worked through the night. Searched the camp. The tent. The equipment. The mine. The tailings pile. Every rock. Every shadow. They found nothing. Just David's absence. Heavy and complete. As dawn broke over the canyon rim, Marcus sat on the log where Cole had been. Elena stood at the edge of the firelight. The belt was still wrapped around her hand. He's gone, she said. David's gone. And Cole knows where. Marcus knew she was right. Cole knew. And Cole wasn't talking. Which meant they'd have to make him talk. One way or another. Chapter 6. The F-250 made it 15 miles before the temperature gauge climbed into the red. Marcus pulled over. Shut down the engine. Opened the hood. Steam hissed from the radiator cap. How bad? Elena asked from the passenger seat. Bad enough to stop. Not bad enough to quit. They were halfway down the mountain. The road behind them was rough. The road ahead wasn't better. But at least it was downhill. Gravity would do some of the work. Marcus found the gallon jug of water. Poured half into the radiator once it cooled enough to touch. The rest went into Elena's hands. She drank. Passed it back. Cole has a head start, she said. 3 hours. Maybe 4. Where do you think he went? Town. He needs supplies. Fuel. Maybe he thinks we'll give up and leave. Elena's hand went to her pocket. The belt was there. Folded. The silver buckle pressed against the fabric. She'd been carrying it since the camp. Like a talisman. Or evidence she was afraid to lose. He killed David, she said. I know it. You know it. But we can't prove it. Not yet. Will we ever? Marcus closed the hood. Started the engine. The temperature gauge held steady. For now. Bodies are hard to hide in the desert, Marcus said. Eventually, they show up. Weather uncovers them. Animals dig them up. Hikers find bones. It takes time. But it happens. How much time? Depends on how deep Cole buried him. How well he covered his tracks. They drove. The truck overheated again at mile marker 32. Marcus let it cool. Added more water. Continued. The sun was setting when they reached pavement. The transition from dirt to asphalt felt like crossing from one world into another. The truck's tires hummed. Smooth. Even. The violence of the mountain road gave way to the mundane rhythm of civilization. Ridgecrest appeared on the horizon. Small. Dusty. A collection of buildings huddled together against the emptiness. Population 15,000. Most of them worked at the naval base or served the people who did. Marcus drove past gas stations. Fast food. Dollar stores. He was looking for something specific. He found it on the east side of town. A single-story building. Peeling paint. Flickering neon sign, Ridgecrest Inn. Vacancy. Weekly rates. The parking lot held 6 vehicles. 3 were trucks. 1 was a sedan with California plates. 2 were motorcycles. No Silverado. Marcus pulled in. Parked facing the office. Engine running. You think Cole stays here? Elena asked. Tomas said Cole comes to town every few weeks. Buys supplies. Pays cash. This is the kind of place that doesn't ask questions if you pay cash. The office was small. A desk. A bulletin board with faded notices about pool rules and checkout times. A television playing a game show. The sound was loud. Canned laughter. A man sat behind the desk. 60. Overweight. He wore a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts. His attention was fixed on the TV. He didn't look up when they walked in. Marcus stood at the desk. Waited. The man glanced over during a commercial. Help you? Room 12, Marcus said. Occupied. Who's in it? The man's eyes narrowed. Why? I'm looking for someone. Name's Cole Brennan. The man's expression didn't change. Can't give out guest information. Marcus pulled out his wallet. Set a 50 on the desk. The man looked at it. Looked at Marcus. Took the 50. Folded it. Put it in his shirt pocket. Registered to a Cole Brennan, the man said. Paid cash for the week. Checked in 4 days ago. Is he here now? Truck's gone. Left this morning. Early. Haven't seen him come back. What kind of truck? Silverado. Nevada plates. Dark blue. Dent in the rear fender. Marcus turned to Elena. That's him. So we wait, she asked. We wait. They went back to the F-250. Marcus backed into a space at the far end of the lot. Good view of room 12. Good view of the road. Engine off. Windows cracked. The waiting started. Elena leaned against the passenger window. She was exhausted. 3 days without real sleep. The adrenaline from the camp confrontation was wearing off, leaving her hollow. You should rest, Marcus said. I can't. Try. She closed her eyes. Open them. What if he doesn't come back? Then we find him another way. How? We ask around. Show his photo. Someone's seen him. Someone always sees. Elena pulled the belt from her pocket. Unfolded it. The leather was worn but cared for. The buckle caught the parking lot lights. The engraving was clear. E+D, their initials. Intertwined. I gave him this on our 2nd anniversary, she said. We couldn't afford much. I saved for 3 months to buy it. He cried when he opened it. Said it was the most thoughtful thing anyone had ever given him. He wore it every day. Every single day. He said it reminded him why he was working. Why he was building. Why everything mattered. She traced the initials with her thumb. Cole's wearing David's life. His clothes. His belt. Probably sleeping in his tent. Using his tools. And David's just gone. Erased. Marcus didn't respond. Sometimes silence was better than platitudes. They sat. The light faded. The neon sign flickered to life. Red and blue. Vacancy. The letters buzzed. One of them was broken. It read, VA ANSI. Traffic passed on the street. Pickup trucks. Sedans. A school bus. Nobody turned into the lot. Elena's breathing slowed. Her head tilted against the window. Sleep finally took her. Marcus watched the road. Watched room 12. The door was closed. Curtains drawn. No movement. Hours passed. At 8:43 by the dashboard clock, headlights turned into the lot. Silverado. Dark blue. Nevada plates. Dent in the rear fender. Marcus touched Elena's arm. He's here. She woke. Sat up. Her hand went to the belt. Gripping it. Cole Brennan parked in front of room 12. Got out. He looked different than he had at the camp. Cleaned up. Fresh clothes. New boots. A collared shirt. Clean shaven. He looked like a man who'd just come from dinner at a restaurant. Fed. Rested. Comfortable. He carried a paper bag. Groceries. He walked to the door. Unlocked it. Went inside. The light came on. Visible through the gap in the curtains. Marcus reached for the door handle. Elena grabbed his wrist. What's the plan? We talked to him. He'll lie. Probably. So what's the point? To see what he lies about. And how. Liars always make mistakes. They add too much detail. Or not enough. They contradict themselves. We listen. We watch. We find the cracks. And then we press. Marcus got out. Elena followed. They crossed the parking lot. The asphalt was warm under their feet. Heat from the day radiating back into the night. Marcus reached room 12. He looked at Elena. Stay behind me. No. Elena. He's seen me already. At the camp. He knows who I am. I'm not hiding. Marcus didn't argue. She was right. Elena stepped forward. Knocked on the door. 3 hard knocks. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Cole Brennan stood in the doorway. He was holding a beer. Corona. Lime wedge in the neck. He looked at Elena. His face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession. Surprise. Recognition. Calculation. Then the mask came on. Concern. Practiced. Perfect. Can I help you? Cole asked. I'm looking for my husband, Elena said. David Navarro. Cole's eyebrows went up. Mrs. Navarro. Yes. David talked about you. He showed me photos. You're here. In Ridgecrest. I'm looking for David. Cole's face arranged itself into sympathy. Come in. Please. Let's talk. He stepped back. Held the door open. Elena walked in. Marcus followed. His hand stayed near the Glock on his hip. Cole saw the gesture. Smiled. And you are? Cole asked. The skeptic, Marcus said. The room was small. One queen bed. Dresser. Television, on mute. The bed was made. Military corners. Everything neat. A duffel bag sat on the luggage rack. Zip closed. Ready to go. Cole gestured to the bed. Please. Sit. Elena remained standing. Marcus stood by the door, blocking the exit. Cole sat in the room's only chair. Set his beer on the dresser. He looked relaxed. Comfortable. A man, entertaining unexpected guests. I'm glad you're here, Cole said. I've been worried about David. About how to reach you. Why didn't you call me? Elena asked. I don't have your number. David kept his phone locked. I couldn't access his contacts. Where is he? Cole's expression shifted. Sadness. Regret. He left Mrs. Navarro. About 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry. I assumed he would have contacted you by now. Left where? Los Angeles. He said he was done prospecting. Said he missed you. Said he was going to find work in the city. Construction. His trade. He thought he could make more money faster that way. Why wouldn't he tell me? He was ashamed. We didn't find much gold. Just enough to cover expenses. He felt like he'd failed. He said he couldn't come home empty-handed. He wanted to rebuild first. Get stable. Then send for you. Elena's voice was ice. You're lying. Cole's expression didn't change. I understand this is hard to hear. You're lying. David wouldn't leave without telling me. And he definitely wouldn't leave his belt. She pulled it from her pocket. Held it up. The buckle caught the overhead light. E+D. Cole looked at the belt. Back at Elena. His face gave nothing away. He gave that to me, Cole said. As payment. For guiding him. For showing him the claim. He said he didn't need it anymore. Said material things didn't matter. Only the future mattered. David would never give this away. I gave it to him. Our anniversary. People change their priorities when they're desperate. Marcus stepped forward. Where's David's truck? He drove it out. Headed west. We found his truck. At the camp. Doors unlocked. Keys in the ignition. Battery dead. Cole's expression flickered. Just for a second. Then smoothed. You must have found a different truck. David drove his out. Blue F-150. Said he'd sell it in L.A. Use the money for rent. The registration was in the glove box. David Michael Navarro. Columbus, Ohio. Cole stood. Walked to the dresser. Picked up his beer. Took a drink. His movements were casual. But his eyes were different now. Harder. Calculating. Look, Cole said. I understand you're upset. You came all this way. You want answers. But I've told you what I know. David left. He went to L.A. If he hasn't contacted you, that's between you and him. Not me. You have his belt, Elena said. Which he gave me. You have his truck. Which is still at the claim. I use it for storage. He said I could keep it until he came back for it. He never came back. Marcus moved to the duffel bag. Unzipped it. Cole's hand moved toward his waistband. Stopped. I wouldn't, Marcus said. His hand rested on the Glock. Cole raised his hands. Just stretching. No need for drama. Marcus opened the duffel. Inside, clothes, toiletries, a box of ammunition. And at the bottom, wrapped in a shirt, something hard. He pulled it out. A wedding ring. Gold. Engraved inside, E+D, forever. Elena's breath caught. She reached for it. Held it. The ring she'd put on David's finger 6 years ago. She looked at Cole. He would never take this off. Cole's mask was cracking. The concern was gone. What replaced it was cold. Flat. Predatory. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Either way, you're in my room. Going through my belongings. Without a warrant. Without a badge. I suggest you leave before I call the police. Call them, Marcus said. I'd like to explain how you came to possess a missing man's wedding ring. Cole's eyes went to the door. To Marcus blocking it. To Elena holding the ring. He was calculating odds. Exits. Options. Get out, Cole said. Both of you. Now. Not without answers, Elena said. You want answers? Hire a private investigator. File a missing person report. But don't come into my room making accusations you can't prove. Where is he? Elena's voice broke. Where's David? Cole's face went blank. Empty. I don't know. And I don't care. He was my partner. Now he's not. That's all there is. He moved toward the door. Marcus blocked him. Move, Cole said. Make me. They stared at each other. The room was small. The tension was thick. Finally, Cole smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Fine. You want to play detective? Go ahead. Search the mountains. Search the claim. Dig up every rock. You won't find anything. Because there's nothing to find. David left. I stayed. End of story. He sat back down in the chair. Picked up his beer. Drank. You're welcome to call the police. Report your suspicions. They'll take a statement. Maybe send someone to the claim. They'll find exactly what I found. An abandoned camp. An empty mine. No body. No crime. Just a man who decided to leave. Marcus pulled out his phone. Took photos. The duffel. The ring. The belt. The room. What are you doing? Cole asked. Documenting. For who? Anyone who'll listen. Cole laughed. Good luck with that. Marcus and Elena left. Walked back to the truck. Got in. Elena was shaking. She held the ring in one hand. The belt in the other. Physical pieces of David. But no David. He killed him, she said. We both know it. But we can't prove it. Marcus started the engine. Not yet. When? When we find the body. Or when Cole makes a mistake. Killers always make mistakes. It's just a matter of time. He drove out of the parking lot. Turned north. Toward the mountains. Toward the place where David Navarro had disappeared, and Cole Brennan had stayed behind. The night was cold. The stars were bright. And somewhere in the dark, the truth was waiting. Chapter 7. They sat in the F-250 with the engine off and the windows cracked, letting the desert night seep into the cab along with the smell of creosote and distant highway exhaust. The motel sign cast alternating red and blue light across the parking lot, creating shadows that moved without anything moving, an optical trick that made the whole scene feel like it was underwater or in a fever dream. Marcus had backed into the space at the far corner, Away from the office, away from the sodium lights that turned everything the color of old photographs. Elena held David's wedding ring in her right hand, and his belt in her left, one piece of evidence in each palm, like she was weighing them on some cosmic scale that would tell her what they meant. The ring was warm from her grip. The belt leather was cool and supple, worn smooth from years of David's body pressing against it, shaping it to his specific geometry. She could see where he'd buckled it, the worn spot on the leather where the prong had gone through the same hole 1,000 times. Cole had punched a new hole 2 inches over. His waist was thicker, or maybe he just wore his pants differently, lower on the hips, like a man who spent his life outdoors and didn't care about appearances. "We should go to the police," Marcus said, breaking the silence that had stretched for 5 minutes since they'd left Cole's room. His voice was careful, measured, the way you talk to someone standing on a ledge. "File a report. Show them what we have. Let them decide if there's enough to investigate." "And say what?" Elena's voice came out flat, drained of the fury that had carried her through the confrontation. Now she just sounded tired, like someone who'd walked too far and still couldn't see the destination. "That a man is wearing my husband's belt. That his truck was abandoned. That he stopped writing in his journal. That his partner has his wedding ring. That his claim was signed over under suspicious circumstances. That he disappeared without a trace, and the last person to see him alive is living in a motel and driving a truck with out-of-state plates." Elena turned the ring over in her fingers, catching the parking lot light. The engraving inside was barely visible in the dim illumination, but she knew what it said because she'd chosen the words herself at the jewelry store in Columbus, the one on High Street where they'd bought the engagement ring 2 years before the wedding. E+D, forever. She'd believed that word when she'd had it engraved. Forever. It seemed like such an achievable thing back then, like a destination you could reach if you just kept driving in the right direction. "Cole has paperwork," she said, repeating what Cole had told them with such confidence, that smug certainty of a man who knew he'd covered all the angles. "He has a story that explains everything." David left. David signed over the claim. David gave him the belt and the ring as payment for debts or guidance or whatever fiction he's selling this week. "We have suspicions. We have circumstantial evidence. We have objects that used to belong to my husband, but don't prove anything except that they changed hands." Marcus shifted in his seat, and the old springs creaked in a way that sounded like a judgment. He'd been a cop once, Marcus had told her that first day on the salt flat, back before she knew him well enough to read the regret in his voice when he said it. Military police in Afghanistan. Then contract security work in places where the rules were suggestions and the law was whatever the guy with the biggest gun said it was. He'd left that world because he got tired of watching bad men get away with things while good men disappeared. And here he was again, watching it happen, unable to stop it because the system required proof, and proof required bodies, and bodies required someone to dig in the right place. "The truck is evidence," Marcus insisted, but there was less conviction in his voice now. He was arguing with himself as much as with her. Someone rolled it into that ravine. That's destruction of property, at minimum. Probably more, if we can prove David didn't do it himself. "Could have been an accident," Elena said, echoing Cole's probable defense. "Could have been a flash flood. Could have been David trying to drive it out and losing control. We don't know. We're guessing. And guessing doesn't hold up in court." The boot then. The notebook. His wallet left in the glove box with his cash and credit cards still inside. What kind of man abandons his truck with his wallet in it? The kind who's running from something, or towards something, or who just stopped caring about material possessions. Cole will have an explanation for everything. That's what predators do. They plan. They anticipate questions. They rehearse their stories until they sound more true than the truth. Marcus turned to look at her, really look at her, and in the strange light from the motel sign, his face cycled through colors like a mood ring. Red. Blue. Red again. You've given up. I've gotten realistic. She set the ring on the dashboard and the belt in her lap, unable to hold them anymore, unable to carry the physical weight of David's absence pressed into her palms. Cole killed my husband. We both know it. But knowing and proving are different countries, and we're stuck on the wrong side of the border without a passport. The parking lot was mostly empty now. A couple had checked into room 7 an hour ago, laughing and stumbling drunk, and their voices had filtered through the walls until they'd either passed out or moved their celebration to activities that didn't require volume. A truck had come and gone, someone visiting room 3 for exactly 11 minutes by Marcus's watch, leaving behind nothing but diesel exhaust and implications. This was that kind of motel, the kind where people came for reasons they didn't discuss, and left before anyone could ask questions. "Tell me about him," Marcus said, and Elena realized he wasn't looking at the motel anymore but at her, and the question wasn't rhetorical. "Tell me about David." Not the version from the photos or the notebook. The real person. The one who got frustrated or made bad jokes or left dishes in the sink. Elena almost smiled despite everything. He hummed when he worked. Old songs. Stuff his father used to play. Creedence. The Stones. He didn't know all the words, so he just hummed the melody while he measured wood or marked cuts. It drove me crazy at first. Then I missed it when he wasn't there. What else? He collected rocks. Not valuable ones. Just ones that looked interesting. He'd come home from job sites with pebbles in his pockets. Said they reminded him that everything was made from something else, that a house was just organized rock when you thought about it. He had a jar full of them on his workbench. Different colors. Different textures. I thought it was silly. Now I wish I'd paid more attention, asked him about each one, learned what he saw in them that I couldn't. The motel sign buzzed and flickered, and for a moment the red light died completely before stuttering back to life. Marcus was quiet, giving her space to keep talking or stop whichever she needed. He trusted people, Elena continued, and her voice got smaller, tighter, like she was squeezing words through a narrowing passage. Too much. His mother used to warn him about it. Said the world wasn't as kind as he wanted it to be. But David thought that was a failure of imagination, not a statement of fact. He believed people were basically good until they proved otherwise. And even then, he made excuses for them. Said they must be hurting. Said hurt people hurt people. Did he ever talk about Cole specifically? In his texts or his notebook? He called him experienced. Knowledgeable. Said Cole had been prospecting for years and knew the mountains like his own hands. Said they were lucky to have found each other. Lucky, Marcus repeated, and the word sounded bitter in his mouth. David believed in luck. In signs. In things happening for reasons. When his business collapsed, he said it was the universe telling him he needed to try something different. When he found the clam online for $800, he said it was meant to be. When Cole showed up at the gas station the day he arrived, David called it fate. And what did you think it was? Elena looked at the ring on the dashboard, at the belt in her lap, at the motel room door that concealed a man who'd taken everything from her except the doubt. I think it was a trap. And David walked into it smiling, because he didn't know traps existed. Not for people like him. Not for people who hummed while they worked, and collected rocks and believed the world was fundamentally good. Marcus started the engine, and the old diesel coughed to life with a sound like a terminal smoker clearing his throat. The dashboard lights came on, illuminating the ring, making it look more like evidence than a promise. We're not done, he said, and there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, something harder and more certain. Cole thinks he's won because he has a story, and we have questions. But stories have holes. And questions have answers if you dig deep enough. Where do we dig? The claim. The mine. The places Cole doesn't want us looking. He's confident now, comfortable, but comfortable people make mistakes. They get sloppy. They forget details. They assume they're smarter than everyone else. And if we don't find anything? Marcus put the truck in gear, but didn't move yet. Just let it idle while he chose his words with the same care he'd use choosing a tool for a specific job. Then we make Cole uncomfortable. We stay close. We ask questions. We show up when he doesn't expect us. Predators hate being watched. It makes them nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. That sounds like harassment. That sounds like investigating. We're not the police. We don't need warrants or probable cause. We're just two people looking for a missing man. If Cole has nothing to hide, our presence shouldn't bother him. If it does, that tells us something. Elena picked up the ring and the belt, tucking them into her jacket pockets where they'd ride close to her body, physical reminders of what she was fighting for and who she'd lost. The weight of them felt different now, less like artifacts and more like ammunition. Cole said David was ashamed, that he felt like he'd failed. Cole's a liar. But what if he wasn't lying about that part? What if David did feel like a failure? What if he stayed up there, kept digging, kept hoping, because coming home empty-handed seemed worse than not coming home at all? Marcus looked at her with something that might have been sympathy or might have been recognition, the look of someone who'd felt that particular weight himself. Then he was wrong. You would have taken him back, with gold or without it. That's what love means. I never got to tell him that. I was angry when he left. I told him prospecting was stupid, that we didn't need gold, we needed stability. I made him feel like he was chasing fantasy instead of trying to save us. The last thing I said to him was criticism. And now that's all I have left. The memory of my own voice telling him he wasn't enough. The truck's heater kicked in, blowing warm air that smelled faintly of antifreeze and old leather. Marcus turned it off. The desert night was cold, but not cold enough to hide in mechanical warmth. You know what I did in Afghanistan? Marcus asked, and it wasn't really a question but the preamble to a confession. I investigated crimes. Theft. Assault. Murder. And the thing I learned was this: the truth doesn't care about timing. It doesn't care if you were angry or kind, right or wrong in the moment. The truth just exists, waiting to be uncovered. Your last words to David don't change what happened to him. They don't make Cole's actions your fault. You get to feel guilty if you want. That's your choice. But don't let guilt blind you to justice. Elena thought about that, turning it over in her mind the way she'd turned the ring over in her fingers. Justice. The word sounded almost quaint out here, in this parking lot, outside this motel where Cole Brennan slept peacefully while David's body lay somewhere in the desert, alone in the dark. Justice required systems, procedures, evidence chains, courtrooms, juries. It required civilization. And they were a long way from civilization, sitting in a truck that barely ran, holding objects that proved nothing, except that love left artifacts when it ended. Tomorrow, Marcus said, we go back to the claim. We search every inch of it. We look for disturbed ground, fresh digging, anything that doesn't fit the landscape. We find where Cole buried him. And if Cole's there, then we ask him nicely to leave while we look around. And if he refuses, we ask him less nicely. That's illegal. So is murder. We're picking which laws to break and which ones to uphold. That's all civilization is anyway. A series of compromises between the rules we need and the rules we can afford. He pulled out of the parking lot and turned north, toward the mountains that were invisible in the darkness but present anyway, a weight on the horizon that you felt rather than saw. The road was empty. The town fell away behind them. Soon there was nothing but asphalt and desert, and the distant lights of the naval base where they tested weapons designed to erase other people from the earth efficiently and from a comfortable distance. Elena closed her eyes and saw David in her mind, not as he was in the photos or even in her memories, but as he might be now. Bones in the desert. Flesh returned to earth. Identity reduced to the metal and leather that survived after everything else surrendered to time and temperature and the patient work of decomposition. She saw Cole walking past David's grave every day, whistling, comfortable, secure in his belief that the desert kept secrets better than any co-conspirator. But the desert only kept secrets until someone asked the right questions in the right places. And Elena was done asking politely. "Tomorrow," she said, agreeing with Marcus not just about the plan, but about the philosophy behind it. "We dig until we find him." The truck climbed into the foothills, headlights cutting tunnels through the darkness, chasing a truth that was buried but not gone, waiting for someone who cared enough to keep looking long after reasonable people would have given up and gone home. Chapter 8. The drive back into the mountains took 3 hours through darkness so complete, it felt like traveling through the negative space of the world, where light had never existed and never would. Marcus kept the F-250 in low range and let the transmission do the braking work on the descents, saving what was left of the brake pads for moments when hydraulics actually mattered. The headlights illuminated 10 feet of road at a time, no more, creating the illusion that they were driving through a tunnel that constructed itself as they advanced and collapsed behind them into nothingness. Elena hadn't spoken since they'd left the motel parking lot. She sat with her back against the passenger door, angled so she could watch Marcus drive and see the darkness beyond the windshield at the same time, existing in that liminal space between observation and participation. The ring and the belt were still in her jacket pockets, weights that pulled at the fabric and reminded her with every movement that she was carrying David's absence like physical cargo. Her phone was on her lap, the screen dark because there was no signal this far into the mountains and no one to call even if there was. The road deteriorated as they climbed, transitioning from maintained pavement to maintained gravel to gravel that aspired to maintenance to something that was really just a geological suggestion about where previous vehicles had chosen to drive. Marcus knew this route now, had memorized its worst sections and its marginally less terrible sections, could read the terrain well enough to know when to angle the truck to take a washout at 45 degrees instead of straight on. The skills came back to him from places he tried not to think about, training grounds in Georgia, and deployments in countries where roads were political statements and choosing the wrong route meant IEDs and ambush points. Different desert. Same mathematics of survival. "Tell me the plan again," Elena said, breaking her silence when they were 2 miles from the claim, close enough that sound might carry if the wind was wrong. "We arrive at dawn. Early enough that Cole's probably still sleeping or just waking up. We find a position on the ridge where we can observe the camp without being seen. We watch. We learn his routine. We figure out where he goes, what he does when he's vulnerable. And then we go down. We talk to him. We ask him questions he doesn't want to answer. He'll lie. Probably. But lies have architecture. They're built on foundations that can be examined. If he tells us David went to Los Angeles, we ask him which road David took out. If he says David drove his truck, we ask him why we found the truck at the claim. If he says David gave him the belt, we ask him why David would give away something his wife engraved for him. Each answer creates new questions. Eventually, the structure collapses under its own inconsistencies. Elena watched the darkness flow past the window, infinite and unreadable. Unless he just refuses to talk. Unless he tells us to leave and threatens to shoot us if we don't. Then we make him choose between pulling the trigger and living with witnesses who know what he did. Most killers are cowards at the core. They kill because it solves a problem without requiring courage. They ambush. They poison. They shoot people in the back when those people are looking the other way. Confronting them directly, making them face the consequences in real time that disrupts their comfort zone. You've done this before. It was a statement, not a question. But Marcus answered anyway, because the darkness and the isolation made honesty easier than deflection. Different versions of it. Different places. Same essential human math. Bad people think they're smarter than everyone else. That arrogance is the crack in their armor. You just have to find it and pry. They passed the mile marker where they'd found David's F-150 4 days ago, though it felt like months had passed since then, time dilating in the way it did when every moment carried weight and consequence. The truck was still there, visible in Marcus's headlights as a darker shadow against the dark hillside, a monument to abandonment that nobody would maintain or remember. In 5 years it would be scrap metal. In 10 years it would be part of the landscape, another desert artifact that hikers would photograph and wonder about without knowing the story behind it. The road narrowed to single-track width, forcing Marcus to slow to 5 miles per hour and navigate by instinct more than sight. Branches scraped the sides of the truck, leaving green streaks on the paint that would oxidize to brown by next week. The grade steepened. The engine worked harder. The temperature gauge climbed but stayed below the red line, balanced on that knife edge between functional and cooked. At the washout where the trail became hiking only, Marcus killed the engine and doused the lights. The silence that rushed in to fill the vacuum was so profound, it had its own presence, its own personality. Not peaceful. Just absent. The kind of quiet that existed before humans invented noise. They sat in the darkness and let their eyes adjust. It took 15 minutes for the rods and cones to recalibrate, for the starlight to register as illumination instead of decoration. When Marcus could see Elena's face in the ambient light from the universe, he knew they were ready. "We hike from here," he said, voice low, even though there was no one to hear except possibly Cole, 2 miles away, and probably inside his tent if he was here at all. 2 hours to the camp. We arrive before sunrise. We find the ridge position I scouted on the map. We wait. Elena zipped her jacket and checked her boots. The duct tape Marcus had wrapped around them days ago, now gray with dust and starting to separate. She'd need new footwear soon. You couldn't hunt a killer in shoes, held together with hope and adhesive. Marcus assembled his gear with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd done it so many times, it didn't require thought. Winchester rifle. 40 rounds of .308 in his jacket pockets. Binoculars. Water. Protein bars. Knife. The Glock stayed on his hip where it belonged, loaded and accessible but not aggressive, the sort of firearm you carried because you were prepared, not because you were looking. They locked the truck and started walking, using flashlights sparingly and only when the trail required it, preferring to let their adjusted eyes do the work that technology would do brighter but less quietly. The path was rough, but Marcus had memorized its worst features on the way down, knew where the loose rocks congregated, and where the trail narrowed to inches beside drops that fell into darkness without visible bottoms. Elena moved well for someone who'd never hiked before this week, had learned through necessity and repetition how to place her feet and distribute her weight, how to breathe in the thin air and pace herself for distance rather than speed. She was transforming in ways Marcus recognized from his own history, shedding the civilian assumption that rules would protect her and systems would deliver justice, accepting the older truth that sometimes you had to become dangerous to stop dangerous people. They reached the cairn David had built, as the eastern sky began its slow fade from black to charcoal. The stacked stones stood exactly as they'd found them, undisturbed by wind or animals or the passage of time, a monument to careful hands and thoughtful construction. Elena touched the top stone as they passed, a gesture of connection or blessing or simple acknowledgement that Marcus didn't interrupt with questions. The ridge position Marcus had identified from the topographic map was a tumble of boulders that had calved off the canyon wall sometime in the geological past, and landed in a configuration that provided cover and elevation and clear sightlines to the valley below. They climbed into the rocks and settled into positions that wouldn't cramp their legs or block their vision, finding that balance between comfort and readiness that military people learn to occupy for hours at a time. The sun broke the horizon at 6:47. Marcus had checked his watch every few minutes during the approach, needed to know the timing for reasons he couldn't articulate, but felt important nonetheless. Light spread across the valley floor like spilled paint, revealing details that darkness had hidden, giving color and texture to what had been only shapes and suggestions. The camp materialized below them, and it was exactly as Elena had described from David's notebook, and exactly as Marcus had imagined from Tomas's description. The tent sat on a wooden platform so level and square it looked like precision carpentry, which it was. Solar panels on tilting frames that could track the sun. A generator under a tarp. The sluice box positioned in the creek where water flow was optimal. Tools arranged on tarps. Firewood stacked by size. Everything organized and intentional. David's influence visible in every detail that mattered. And Cole's Silverado, parked in the shade of an overhang, telling them that yes, he was here. Yes, they would have their confrontation. Yes, this was the day when something would break or resolve or escalate beyond the point of peaceful conclusion. Marcus handed Elena the binoculars. Watch the tent. He'll come out eventually. Probably needs to piss or make coffee or both. That'll tell us if he's alone. Elena focused the binoculars, adjusted the interpupillary distance until the image sharpened. What if David's in there? What if he's alive? Then we see him when he comes out. Then everything changes. Then Cole's story becomes attempted kidnapping or false imprisonment instead of murder. Then we have different options. But you don't think he's in there? No. Why not? Because Cole wouldn't be this comfortable if he had a prisoner to manage. Prisoners require attention. They require force or restraint or psychological manipulation. They create problems. Cole looks like a man who solved his problems weeks ago and is now enjoying the solution. The tent flap moved. Marcus brought up the Winchester, not aiming but ready, the rifle stock against his shoulder, and his finger resting on the trigger guard instead of the trigger itself, maintaining that critical distinction between prepared and committed. Cole emerged into the morning light, and seeing him for the first time in daylight and from this elevation gave Marcus a perspective the motel room confrontation hadn't provided. Cole was bigger than he'd seemed in confined spaces, broader through the shoulders and thicker through the chest, the build of a man who'd done physical labor his entire adult life and maintained the muscle mass through regular use. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt and work boots that looked expensive and new, the kind of gear you bought when you suddenly had money and wanted to project success. And David's belt. Even from this distance, even without magnification, Marcus could see it was the same belt Elena had taken from Cole's duffel. The same leather and silver combination that David had worn every day for 2 years until he'd stopped wearing anything at all. He's wearing it, Elena said, confirming what Marcus already saw, needing to say it out loud because saying things made them real, and real things could be confronted. He's walking around wearing David's belt like it's a trophy. Cole stretched, worked the stiffness out of his back, and walked to the creek where the sluice box waited. He knelt beside it and began the process of panning, a methodical rhythm that spoke to experience and patience, swirling water and gravel in the pan, letting the lighter material wash away, checking the remaining sediment for the weight and color that meant gold. They watched him work for 2 hours. He was thorough, efficient. He found color several times. Marcus could see the moment of discovery in Cole's body language even from 300 yards away. The way he tilted the pan toward the sun and held very still, examining what he'd found before transferring it to a glass jar that sat on a flat rock beside the sluice box. No one else emerged from the tent. No one else worked the claim, or moved through the camp, or checked the generator, or adjusted the solar panels. Cole was alone, had clearly been alone for long enough that his routines were established and his confidence was absolute. "He's not coming out," Elena said when the sun was high enough to make the valley floor shimmer with heat. David. He's not in that tent. He's not working. He's not anywhere. No, Marcus agreed. He's not. So where is he? Marcus had been studying the claim with that question in mind, noting every feature that didn't fit the natural landscape, every place where earth had been disturbed or moved or shaped by human intervention. The mine entrance was obvious, a black square cut into the hillside and shored with fresh timber. The tailings pile beside it was substantial, suggesting weeks or months of excavation. Tons of rock moved from inside the mountain to outside, creating a gray slope of crushed stone that would take years to revegetate. And beside the tent, near the platform but not quite part of it, a patch of ground that looked different from the surrounding earth. Flatter. More compacted. With rocks arranged on top in a pattern that might have been decorative or might have been weight. Stones placed to keep something down or keep animals out or mark a place that mattered. There, Marcus said, pointing. 20 feet northwest of the tent. See that rectangular patch? The rocks on top. Elena found it with the binoculars. Studied it. That's a grave. That's something buried. Whether it's a grave depends on what's under the rocks. We have to dig it up. We have to get Cole away from it first. He's not going to let us excavate his camp while he stands there watching. He'll either shoot us or call the sheriff or both. So we wait for him to leave. Or we make him leave. Force him into town. Create a crisis that requires his immediate attention somewhere other than here. Elena lowered the binoculars and turned to look at Marcus directly, reading his face for clues about what he meant and whether he was serious. How do we do that? We make him think we've found evidence. We call him. Tell him we've been to the sheriff. Tell him there's a warrant coming. Make him panic. Panicked people make mistakes. They abandon positions that seem secure. They run to protect themselves instead of protecting their crimes. He'll know we're bluffing. Maybe. But he can't be sure. And uncertainty is corrosive. It eats at confidence. It makes people check things they thought were secure and double-check things they thought were hidden. If we're convincing enough, if we sell it hard enough, Cole will come to town to assess the threat. And when he does, we go down there and dig. What if he comes back while we're digging? Then we have a confrontation with shovels instead of questions. Either way, we get answers. Either way, this ends today. Marcus chambered around in the Winchester and settled deeper into the rocks, finding a position he could hold for hours if necessary, prepared to wait, because waiting was the foundation of every successful ambush and every careful hunt. Cole was down there being comfortable. Marcus was up here being patient. In that asymmetry lay opportunity. Elena settled beside him, the binoculars in her lap and David's belt in her pocket, and something in her expression that Marcus recognized from every mirror he'd looked into for the past decade. The face of someone who'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross, who'd accepted that justice sometimes required you to become what you opposed, who decided that finding the truth mattered more than following the rules designed to obscure it. Today, she said, and it was a promise and a threat and a prayer all compressed into one word. Today, Marcus agreed, and together they watched the man who'd killed her husband go about his morning routine in the valley below, counting down the hours until comfort became crisis and security became exposure. Chapter 9. The decision to descend came after 3 hours of watching Cole move through his morning routine with the casual confidence of a man who believed he'd gotten away with murder. Marcus had seen that particular brand of arrogance before, in forward operating bases and green zones and safe houses where men who'd done terrible things convinced themselves that distance and time equaled immunity. It was a specific kind of blindness, the inability to imagine that consequences could catch up if you just kept moving forward without looking back. They came down from the ridge in a diagonal approach that used the terrain for concealment until the last possible moment, keeping boulders and scrub between themselves and Cole's sightlines, moving when he was bent over the sluice box, and freezing when he straightened to examine what he'd found. The descent took 20 minutes of careful placement and patient stillness, the kind of advance that required you to think 3 steps ahead and accept that slow was smooth and smooth was fast, old infantry wisdom that Marcus's body remembered even when his mind was focused on the immediate problem of getting close to an armed man without triggering a defensive response. Elena moved well behind him, had learned in the past week how to read Marcus's signals and mirror his movements, when to go and when to hold, when to breathe and when to make yourself small. She'd transformed from the woman dying of heat exhaustion in a rental car to someone who could stalk a killer through his own camp without making more noise than the wind made in the dry grass. Fear and necessity were excellent teachers if you were capable of learning their lessons quickly enough to stay alive. They were 30 yards from the sluice box when Cole's posture changed, a subtle shift in his shoulders that said he'd heard something or sensed something or simply developed the predator's instinct that he was being observed. He set down the gold pan with deliberate care, the kind of movement that bought you time to think while looking casual, and straightened to his full height before turning to face the hillside where Marcus and Elena had stopped moving. His hand didn't drift toward the pistol on his hip. He was smarter than that. Instead, he smiled, the same practiced expression he'd deployed at the motel, warm and welcoming and entirely false, a social mask that covered whatever calculations were happening behind his eyes. "Mrs. Navarro," he called across the distance between them, voice carrying easily in the still morning air. "You're persistent. I respect that quality in people. Means you don't quit when things get difficult." Marcus raised the Winchester to a low, ready position, not aiming but making clear he could aim instantly if circumstances required it. The rifle was comfortable in his hands, had the familiar heft and balance of a tool he'd used in enough situations that it felt like an extension of his arms rather than a separate object. "We need to talk," Marcus said, keeping his voice level and his finger outside the trigger guard where Cole could see it, maintaining the fiction that this was still a conversation and not yet something more dangerous. Cole's smile widened a fraction, acknowledging the rifle without appearing concerned about it. "Talking's fine. I got coffee if you want some. Made it fresh about an hour ago. Still hot enough to drink." He gestured toward the tent where a thermos sat on a folding camp table, the kind of hospitality that was either genuine or performance, and with Cole, it was impossible to tell which. "We'll stand," Elena said, and there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before, an edge that sounded like it could cut if you pressed against it wrong. She'd spent 3 hours watching this man work her dead husband's claim, wearing her dead husband's belt, living in her dead husband's camp, and the fury that came from seeing the theft made manifest had burned away whatever remained of her civilian restraint. Cole shrugged with exaggerated casualness, the gesture of someone who didn't care one way or the other, though Marcus noticed his weight had shifted slightly onto the balls of his feet, the unconscious preparation of someone getting ready to move quickly in whatever direction circumstances demanded. "Suit yourselves. What do you want to talk about?" "David," Elena said, and the name came out like an accusation, like a weapon, like the concentrated essence of all the questions that had brought her across the country and into this canyon. "Where is he?" "I told you already. Los Angeles." He got discouraged with the prospecting life, decided to go back to what he knew. Construction work. Building houses. He said. "Stop." Elena's voice cracked like a whip, sharp enough that Cole actually stopped talking, an involuntary response to the command in her tone. "Stop lying. We found his truck. We found his wallet. We found his notebook with the last entry dated June 20th, the same day he texted me that he'd found gold, the same day he stopped all communication. We know he didn't leave. We know he's still here." Cole's expression flickered just for a microsecond, the mask slipping to reveal something colder underneath before he reconstructed the friendly facade. "His truck broke down. He left it. Walked out. People abandon vehicles in the desert all the time when they're more trouble than they're worth. As for the notebook and wallet, he probably forgot them. People forget things when they're in a hurry. Marcus took 3 steps forward, closing the distance to 20 yards, and Cole's hand finally moved toward his hip. Not fast enough to be a draw, but fast enough to show he was thinking about it. Marcus raised the Winchester another increment, bringing the stock to his shoulder and putting his eye to the scope, transforming the rifle from suggestion to promise. "Don't," Marcus said, and the word contained all the implications that further speech would have diluted. Cole froze with his hand halfway to his pistol, caught in that moment of decision where commitment meant consequences and hesitation meant surrendering the initiative. His eyes calculated distances and angles and odds, running through scenarios where he came out alive and scenarios where he didn't. And apparently the math didn't favor him, because his hand slowly rose away from his hip and opened to show his empty palm. "Easy, friend. No need for drama. I'm just reaching for my cigarettes." "Reach slower," Marcus said, and Cole complied, moving with exaggerated deliberation as he extracted a pack of Marlboros from his shirt pocket and shook one free, his movements careful and visible and designed to communicate non-aggression, even as his eyes never stopped evaluating potential responses. Elena circled to Cole's left while he was lighting the cigarette, putting herself at an angle that forced him to divide his attention between 2 threats instead of focusing on one. She'd learned tactical thinking through observation and repetition, understanding without being taught that geometry mattered in confrontations, that angles and positions could substitute for strength or speed if you used them correctly. "You have his belt," she said, and it was an accusation that didn't require a question mark. "The one I gave him for our anniversary. The one with our initials engraved on the buckle." Cole exhaled smoke and glanced down at his waist as though he'd forgotten what he was wearing. A transparent performance that insulted everyone's intelligence but bought him another few seconds to construct whatever lie he was going to deploy. "He gave it to me. As payment. For guiding him to the claim. For showing him where to dig. He said material possessions didn't matter anymore, only the gold mattered, and he wanted to travel light when he left." "Show me the buckle," Elena demanded. And something in the way she said it made it clear this was the moment where diplomacy ended and something else began, the fulcrum point where whatever happened next would be determined by whether Cole chose truth or continued commitment to the fiction he'd constructed. Cole took another drag on his cigarette, buying time, then stubbed it out against the heel of his boot and flicked the butt into the creek where it floated briefly before sinking. His hands moved to his belt buckle, and Marcus's finger moved inside the trigger guard, and the morning air felt suddenly thick with the kind of tension that preceded either violence or revelation, that pregnant pause where multiple futures existed simultaneously until someone's choice collapsed the possibilities into a single outcome. The belt came free with the whisper of leather through denim loops, and Cole held it up in both hands like an offering or a surrender, the silver buckle catching the sunlight and flashing messages in reflected light. Elena stepped forward and took it from him, her fingers tracing the engraved initials that she'd specified to the jeweler in Columbus when she'd thought forever was achievable, and promises were contracts that reality would honor. "E+D," she said, reading the inscription aloud even though everyone could see it, needing to speak it into existence to make it real through vocalization. "Forever. I had this made for him. He wore it every single day for 2 years. He told me it reminded him why he worked, why he pushed himself, why anything mattered. He would never trade this. Not for money. Not for guidance. Not for anything. Which means you didn't get it through trade. You got it another way." Cole's mask was fracturing now, small cracks appearing in the friendly facade as the pressure of maintaining the lie became unsustainable. "Look, Mrs. Navarro, I understand you're grieving. I understand you need answers. But you're making assumptions based on... Where is he?" Elena's voice had dropped to something quieter and more dangerous than shouting, the kind of intensity that didn't need volume to carry weight. Where is David's body? Where did you bury him after you killed him? The silence that followed her accusation had texture and weight, filled all the space between them with implications and challenges, and the fundamental choice that Cole had to make about whether to keep lying or acknowledge the truth that everyone in the canyon already knew. Marcus watched Cole's eyes through the rifle scope, saw them darting between Elena and himself, and the tent and the mine entrance and the Silverado, calculating escape routes and defensive positions and whether he could reach his truck before a .308 round reached him. "You're confused," Cole finally said, but his voice had lost its certainty, the friendly warmth replaced by something flatter and more careful. "David left. I stayed. That's all there is. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't bury anybody. You're letting grief create conspiracy where there's just unfortunate coincidence." Marcus shifted his aim point slightly, moving the crosshairs from center mass to Cole's right shoulder, the kind of shot that would disable without killing, that would drop a man without destroying him. "Here's what I know," Marcus said, speaking slowly and clearly like he was testifying in court or filling out an after-action report. "David's truck is wrecked at the bottom of a ravine. His phone stopped transmitting on June 20th. His credit cards haven't been used. His notebook stops mid-entry on the day he found gold. You're wearing his belt. You're working his claim. You're living in his camp. And there's a rectangular patch of disturbed earth, 20 feet northwest of your tent, with rocks arranged on top in a pattern that looks like someone marking a grave." He watched Cole's face as he cataloged the evidence, saw the moment when the mention of the grave registered, a micro-expression of surprise or concern or calculation that lasted less than a second before Cole's control reasserted itself. But it was enough. That instant of genuine reaction confirmed what Marcus had suspected from the ridge, that the rectangular patch was significant, that something was buried there, that Cole had thought it was hidden well enough that no one would notice or care. "That's where you store supplies," Cole said, but the lie was reflexive now, automatic, the response of someone who'd learned to deny everything as a first principle regardless of whether the denial was plausible. "I bury things to keep them cool. To keep animals out. It's just food and equipment." "Then you won't mind if we dig it up," Elena said, and she was already moving toward the tent, toward the rectangular patch, her boots crunching on gravel and her purpose clear in every line of her body. She'd come 3,000 miles for this answer, had driven through salt flats and climbed through mountains and confronted a killer in his own camp. And now that the truth was within reach, she wasn't going to be stopped by courtesy or protocol or the remote possibility that Cole was telling the truth. Cole moved to intercept her, a fast lateral step that would put him between Elena and the tent, and Marcus's rifle swung to track him, the crosshairs finding him again, and Marcus's voice cutting through the moment like a blade through paper. "Stop moving. Right now. Hands where I can see them." Cole stopped, but his body language had transformed from casual confidence to coiled readiness, the stance of someone who decided that talk was finished and action was imminent. "This is my property," he said, and his voice had shed all pretense of friendliness now, become something harder and more honest. "You're trespassing. You're threatening me. You're making accusations you can't prove. I've got every right to defend myself and my claim. You've got every right to stand there with your hands visible while we verify your story," Marcus said, the rifle still trained on Cole's center mass, his finger on the trigger now instead of outside the guard, the transition from prepared to committed made without conscious thought. "If there's just supplies buried over there, we'll see that and apologize for the intrusion. If there's something else, we'll discuss it. But either way, we're looking. You can cooperate, or you can make this difficult. Your choice." Elena had reached the tent now, was standing over the rectangular patch of earth, examining the rocks that lay scattered across its surface in a pattern that might have been random or might have been intentional. The rocks were various sizes, from fist-sized cobbles to larger stones that would require 2 hands to move, and they covered an area roughly 6 feet by 3 feet, dimensions that were either coincidental or exactly the size you'd need to cover a body. "Mrs. Navarro," Cole called to her, his voice carrying a note of warning or threat or perhaps desperation. "You don't want to do this. You don't want to see what's under there. Trust me. Some things are better left buried." Elena knelt beside the patch and began moving rocks, tossing them aside with deliberate efficiency, the kind of focused work that came from having a clear goal and accepting no obstacles. The first rock. The second. The third. Each one made a solid thunk as it landed in the dirt beside the patch, creating a percussion that counted down toward revelation or disappointment, toward confirmation or confusion, toward the moment when the desert would give up its secret or prove that secrets were all anyone had been projecting onto ambiguous evidence. Cole's hand dropped toward his hip again, fast this time, committed, going for the pistol in a smooth draw that spoke to practice and experience, and Marcus's fingers squeezed the trigger without conscious decision, muscle memory taking over from deliberation, the rifle bucking against his shoulder as the shot cracked across the canyon with a sound like the earth splitting open. Chapter 10. The rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls and came back transformed, multiplied into a percussion section that announced violence to every living thing within a mile radius. Marcus's shoulder absorbed the recoil automatically, his body remembering the physics of firearms even as his mind processed the aftermath, checking his target and evaluating results with the dispassionate efficiency that combat training burned into muscle memory until it became reflex. The round had missed center mass by 18 inches, which at 30 yards with a scoped rifle meant Marcus's aim had been compromised by something, probably the sun angle, hitting the objective lens at exactly the wrong moment to create a flare that shifted his point of impact right and high. The bullet struck the Silverado's hood instead of Cole's chest, punching through sheet metal with a metallic crack and probably destroying the engine block underneath, turning Cole's truck from transportation into expensive scrap in the fraction of a second between trigger pull and impact. Cole dropped behind the Silverado with the practiced speed of someone who'd been shot at before and understood that cover was survival, his body disappearing from Marcus's scope view so completely it was like he'd been erased from existence. Marcus worked the bolt instinctively, ejecting the spent casing in a smooth pump-action rhythm that chambered a fresh round and brought the rifle back into battery, ready to fire again if Cole was stupid enough to present a target worth shooting. Instead, Cole's .45 appeared over the truck bed, the pistol gripped in what had to be his right hand based on the angle, and flame erupted from the barrel twice in rapid succession, muzzle flash bright even in full daylight, the distinctive boom of a heavy-caliber handgun making a different sound than Marcus's rifle, deeper and more visceral, the kind of gunshot that announced serious ammunition designed to make serious holes in serious obstacles. The first round went wide, passing somewhere to Marcus's left with a crack that meant supersonic velocity and near-miss geometry, close enough to hear but not close enough to duck. The second round hit rock, 6 inches from where Elena had been standing before Marcus grabbed her jacket and pulled her down behind the sluice box, the bullet fragmenting against granite and sending stone shrapnel flying in a radial pattern that peppered the ground around them with secondary impacts that sounded like hail on a tin roof. They landed hard behind the sluice box, Marcus on top of Elena in a protective crouch that would stop bullets if his body was tougher than physics allowed, which it wasn't. But combat training didn't care about physics, just positioned itself between the threat and the principle, and hoped armor or luck or divine intervention would make the difference. The sluice box was constructed from half-inch plywood and 2x4 framing, which would stop nothing larger than birdshot but at least concealed their exact position and forced Cole to guess where to aim instead of knowing. "Stay down," Marcus said unnecessarily, because Elena was already flat against the ground, her hands covering her head and her breathing coming in sharp gasps that were either panic or hyperventilation or both, the body's response to suddenly being in a gunfight when 5 minutes ago she'd been expecting a conversation. Cole fired 3 more times in rapid succession, the kind of suppressing fire that wasn't aimed at targets but at concepts, at the general area where threats might exist, keeping them pinned and uncomfortable while he repositioned or escaped or did whatever his tactical calculus told him was the next move. The bullets hit rock, wood, and dirt in a scattered pattern that suggested Cole was shooting one-handed over cover without exposing himself, sacrificing accuracy for volume of fire, which was smart if your goal was escape rather than victory. Then silence, absolute and shocking in its sudden arrival, the absence of gunfire somehow louder than the shots themselves had been, the kind of quiet that made you strain to hear footsteps or voices or the metallic click of a magazine being changed. Marcus raised his head fractionally, bringing just his eyes above the sluice box, scanning the area where Cole had disappeared, looking for movement or mistakes or opportunities. The Silverado's engine coughed to life, diesel smoke belching from the exhaust in a cloud that said the engine was either damaged or running rich or both. But apparently the block hadn't taken the bullet directly because the truck was mobile, backing up in a spray of gravel and dust, tires spinning as Cole punched the accelerator and executed a J-turn that pointed the hood toward the access road. Marcus brought the rifle up, tracking the Silverado through the scope, finding Cole's silhouette visible through the rear window, putting the crosshairs on his upper back between the shoulder blades, the kind of shot that would end the confrontation permanently if Marcus was willing to shoot a man in the back while he was fleeing. His finger rested on the trigger, pressure increasing as he ran the calculation about justice versus murder, about stopping a killer versus becoming one, about whether the law would see this as justified force or premeditated execution. The moment stretched, time dilating the way it did when critical decisions needed making, and Marcus could feel his finger approaching the 4-pound breakpoint that would send another .308 round downrange, could imagine the bullet's flight and impact, could visualize Cole slumping forward as the truck veered off the road and crashed into a boulder, could see the aftermath investigation and the questions that would follow about why Marcus shot an unarmed man who was leaving the scene. His finger eased off the trigger. The decision made itself through some combination of training and conscience and practical awareness that killing Cole would create more problems than it solved, would transform them from victims seeking justice into vigilantes who'd executed a man without trial, would give law enforcement clear-cut murder charges instead of the ambiguous, circumstantial evidence they currently possessed. The Silverado fishtailed onto the access road and accelerated away, dust plume rising behind it like a signal fire announcing retreat, the sound of the engine Doppler shifting as distance increased and the threat level decreased from immediate to eventual. Marcus tracked it through the scope until it disappeared around a bend, then lowered the rifle and conducted a rapid threat assessment of the remaining environment, checking angles and positions for additional dangers before declaring the situation temporarily safe. "He's gone," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm and level despite his heart rate being somewhere north of reasonable, projecting the kind of steady competence that might keep Elena from completely losing her composure. "Heading down the mountain. Probably going to town. Could be coming back with help or weapons or both." Elena sat up slowly, her hands still shaking, dust coating her clothes and small cuts on her palms where she'd caught herself during the dive behind the sluice box. "Did you hit him?" "Hit his truck. Engine's damaged. He'll make it to town, but not much farther." Marcus ejected the magazine from the Winchester and checked the remaining ammunition, counting rounds through the magazine's witness holes, doing the math about how much firepower remained if Cole returned with reinforcements. 3 rounds left in the magazine. 1 in the chamber. 4 shots total. Not enough for a sustained engagement, but sufficient for immediate needs. He reloaded the magazine from the box of cartridges in his jacket pocket, working by feel while maintaining visual awareness of their surroundings, watching the access road and the ridgeline and the tent area, dividing his attention between multiple threat vectors because that's what you did when someone had just tried to kill you and might try again. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before he's back, less if he's got a satellite phone and calls ahead for backup. We need to use that time." Elena brushed dust from her jacket and stood on legs that weren't quite steady yet, using the sluice box for support while her nervous system processed the transition from normal civilian existence to combat zone to post-combat assessment. Use it how? Find David. Document everything. Get evidence we can give to law enforcement that's strong enough they have to investigate. Right now, it's our word against Cole's, and he's got possession and paperwork and a story that holds together if you don't examine it too closely. We need something definitive. Something that can't be explained away. They moved toward the rectangular patch of disturbed earth where Elena had been digging before the shooting started. The rocks she'd removed scattered around the perimeter like markers of interrupted intention. Marcus knelt beside the patch and continued what she'd started, moving stones methodically and setting them aside in a pile that wouldn't interfere with excavation, working with the kind of careful deliberation that archaeology or crime scene investigation required when you needed to preserve context and document position. The ground underneath the rocks was darker than the surrounding soil, more recently disturbed, showing the kind of color difference that came from subsurface material being brought to the surface and exposed to air and sunlight. Marcus grabbed one of the shovels leaning against the tent platform and began to dig, not frantically but with steady efficiency, removing 6 inches of earth at a time and piling it beside the hole, creating a growing mound that would need to be sifted through later if this turned into an official investigation. 12 inches down, the shovel hit something that wasn't rock or soil, something that had give and resistance simultaneously, the kind of feedback that made Marcus stop digging and switch to using his hands, brushing away dirt with careful fingers that were trying to determine texture and composition without disturbing whatever was underneath more than absolutely necessary. Fabric. Blue denim. Jeans. Elena, Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral and factual even though they both knew what this meant, what they'd found, what the next few minutes were going to reveal. Get your phone. Start recording. Document everything exactly as we find it. Elena extracted her phone from her jacket pocket with hands that shook badly enough she almost dropped it, managing to maintain her grip through pure determination. Activating the camera and starting a video recording that captured the hole, the exposed fabric, and Marcus's face as he continued the excavation with the kind of grim focus that the moment demanded. More fabric appeared as Marcus cleared away dirt, working now with a brush he'd grabbed from the tent, using gentle sweeping motions that revealed details without destroying context. Blue jeans. A belt loop. The hem of a shirt. Everything positioned as though the person wearing these clothes had been laid flat on their back and covered with earth, buried face up in a grave that was barely deep enough to conceal a body, but sufficient if you assumed no one would ever look. Marcus cleared the torso area, working carefully around what he knew was coming, preparing himself mentally for the reality of excavating human remains, even though this wasn't his first experience with death or bodies or the ugly aftermath of violence. The shirt was flannel, red and black check pattern, the kind of thing you'd wear for outdoor work in variable temperatures, and it was torn in the back, a ragged hole surrounded by dark staining that extended outward from the perforation in a pattern that spoke to high-velocity impact and fluid dynamics. He reached the head and stopped, letting Elena's camera capture the moment before he cleared the final layer of soil, giving her time to zoom in and document the position and covering before revelation made everything more difficult to process emotionally. Then he brushed away the dirt covering the face, working with delicate precision that felt inadequate for the gravity of what he was doing, revealing features that had been hidden for 3 months but were still recognizable despite decomposition and insect activity, and all the natural processes that returned organic matter to the earth it came from. David Navarro's face looked nothing like the photograph Elena had shown Marcus on her phone screen a week ago in the salt flat. Time and biology had transformed the smiling contractor from Columbus into something that belonged more to the desert than to humanity, skin darkened and tightened and partially consumed by the ecosystem that didn't differentiate between people and any other source of nutrition. His eyes were gone, taken by insects or birds or small mammals that cleaned bones as part of their ecological function. His mouth was open slightly, frozen in whatever expression he'd worn when death arrived, whether surprise or fear or simple confusion about why his partner was pointing a gun at his back. Elena made a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob, something between the two that expressed grief and vindication and horror all compressed into one vocalization. She kept the phone steady, though, kept recording, managed to maintain enough composure that the video would be usable as evidence, even though her world was collapsing around the confirmed reality that her husband was dead, had been dead for months, was buried in a shallow grave at a mining claim in the mountains while she'd been in Ohio waiting for communication that would never arrive. Marcus sat back on his heels and let her process, gave her the space to experience whatever she needed to experience, understanding that there was no right way to discover your spouse's corpse and no timeline that made it easier or harder, just the raw fact of death made manifest in flesh and bone, and the absence of everything that made a person more than biological material. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, because the words needed to be spoken even if they were inadequate, even if they couldn't change anything or make the situation less terrible. "I'm sorry we found him this way. I'm sorry he's gone. I'm sorry Cole did this." Elena nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face but her hands still steady enough to keep recording, to document the crime scene, to build the case that would put Cole Brennan in prison for the rest of his life or possibly on death row, depending on how California's justice system chose to prosecute premeditated murder for financial gain. She panned the camera across the grave, capturing the dimensions and the position of the body, and the gunshot wound in the back that told the story of how David had died, shot while working or walking away or doing anything except facing his killer. Marcus used his own phone to take photographs from multiple angles, creating redundant documentation in case Elena's video was challenged or lost or ruled inadmissible for technical reasons. He photographed the grave site, the body position, the gunshot wound, the surrounding area, the tent, the sluice box, everything that might become relevant in a court proceeding or investigation. He included scale references and GPS coordinates and timestamps, building a comprehensive record that would support their testimony and contradict whatever story Cole tried to construct. The sound of an engine in the distance brought Marcus back to tactical awareness, reminding him that documentation was important, but survival was paramount, that they were still in Cole's territory without backup or communication, or any guarantee that law enforcement would arrive before Cole did. He stood and scanned the access road, trying to determine if the engine sound was approaching or receding, whether it represented threat or opportunity or coincidental traffic that had nothing to do with their situation. "We need to leave," Marcus said, making the decision based on insufficient information but adequate threat assessment. "Now, before Cole comes back with friends or weapons, or a story that puts us on the wrong side of this confrontation. We've got the evidence. We've got documentation. We take it to the sheriff and let them handle the rest." Elena took one last long look at her husband's grave, at the man she'd married in Columbus when they were young and optimistic, and believed that love and hard work could overcome any obstacle. She reached down and touched his chest, or what remained of it, a gesture of farewell or connection or simple acknowledgement that this was real, that David was gone, that the search was over, even though the outcome was the nightmare scenario she'd been trying not to imagine for the past week. "Goodbye," she whispered, and then she stood and turned away from the grave, turned away from the body, turned toward Marcus and the truck, and the long drive back to civilization where justice waited if they could survive long enough to deliver the evidence they'd collected. They moved fast, gathering essential gear and leaving everything else, prioritizing speed over completeness because staying was suicide and delay was dangerous. Marcus kept the Winchester ready, scanning continuously, operating on the assumption that threats were approaching from multiple vectors, and that complacency would get them killed in the time it took to relax vigilance. The F-250 started on the first try, diesel engine catching with a rumble that sounded like salvation, or at least like mobility, which in tactical terms was almost the same thing. Marcus reversed out of their position and swung onto the access road, pointed downhill, ready to ram anything that tried to block their escape, because surrender wasn't an option and stopping meant dying. They descended through switchbacks and washouts at speeds that bordered on reckless, the truck bouncing over obstacles and sliding through loose gravel. But Marcus kept it under control through a combination of skill and desperation, driving with the kind of aggressive competence that emergency situations demanded when survival depended on getting somewhere else faster than threats could intercept you. Elena held David's belt in her lap, and her phone in her hand, the video safely recorded and uploaded to cloud storage where it would exist even if her phone was destroyed, evidence preserved against any attempt to suppress or eliminate the truth. She'd found her husband. She'd documented his murder. She'd built a case that would convict his killer. Now all they had to do was stay alive long enough to deliver it. Chapter 11. They made it 4 miles down the mountain before the lights appeared in Marcus's rearview mirror. 2 sets of headlights climbing through the switchbacks behind them with the kind of aggressive speed that said pursuit rather than coincidence. The sun had dropped below the western ridge, turning the canyon into a corridor of shadow punctuated by the last golden light hitting the high peaks. And in that transitional illumination, the headlights looked predatory and intentional, closing distance with each turn. Marcus pressed the accelerator harder, pushing the F-250 through a washout at 40 miles per hour when 20 would have been optimistic, the truck's suspension bottoming out with a metallic crunch that meant expensive repairs if they survived long enough to worry about maintenance costs. The steering wheel fought his grip as the front tires found purchase on loose gravel and tried to track in directions that didn't align with forward progress, but he muscled it back on line through pure force and determination, keeping them pointed downhill toward the highway that represented escape, or at least better odds than staying on Coles Mountain. "How far to the main road?" Elena asked, bracing herself against the dashboard as the truck slid through a turn that physics suggested should have rolled them into the ravine below. She'd been watching the mirrors too, had seen what Marcus saw, understood without being told that the vehicles behind them weren't random traffic, but something more purposeful and more dangerous. 8 miles. Maybe 9. Depends on whether the trail's washed out past mile marker 12. Marcus checked the mirrors again, calculating closing rates and intercept points, running the tactical math about whether they could reach pavement before the pursuit caught them. Those trucks are moving faster than we are. Better suspension or lighter weight, or drivers who don't care if they crash. It's Cole. He went to town. Got help. Probably. Question is what kind of help? If it's the sheriff, we're getting arrested. If it's not the sheriff, we're getting shot. The distinction mattered in terms of immediate survival strategy, but felt increasingly academic as the headlights grew larger in the mirrors, the gap between pursued and pursuers collapsing at a rate that suggested interception was inevitable and escape was fantasy. Marcus kept driving anyway, maintaining speed and focus because giving up wasn't training and wasn't temperament, because you fought until circumstances made fighting impossible, and then you fought some more. The access road straightened for a 1/4 mile, a rare section of relatively flat ground that allowed the F-250 to reach 50 miles per hour and the pursuing vehicles to hit 60, their superior power-to-weight ratios showing in the acceleration that ate distance like time-lapse photography of decay. Marcus could see them clearly now in the fading light. 2 trucks running side by side where the road widened, coordinated in their approach in a way that suggested communication and planning rather than spontaneous aggression. One was Cole's damaged Silverado, recognizable by the dent in the hood where Marcus's rifle round had punched through metal and probably destroyed the cooling system, steam or smoke trailing from under the hood in a white plume that said the engine was overheating and running on borrowed time. The second truck was a Dodge Ram, newer and cleaner, white with official-looking decals on the door that Marcus couldn't read at this distance, but could interpret based on context and probability. "Law enforcement," Marcus said, confirming Elena's guess but making it specific. "Cole brought a deputy. Or a sheriff. Someone with a badge, who's going to listen to Cole's story about being attacked on his own property by trespassers who fired first. We have evidence. We have video of David's body. We have documentation, which they'll confiscate as evidence in an active investigation. Which means we won't have access to it while they determine whether Cole's story or our story is more believable. Which gives Cole time to lawyer up and construct whatever narrative serves his purposes." The road narrowed again, forcing the pursuing trucks into single file, and Marcus used the momentary advantage to push harder through a section of switchbacks that required precise steering and aggressive braking, the kind of technical driving that rewarded skill more than raw power. The F-250 wasn't built for performance, was a work truck designed for hauling capacity rather than handling dynamics, but Marcus extracted everything the chassis could deliver, using weight transfer and momentum and a decade of tactical driving courses to keep them ahead of pursuit for another 90 seconds. Then the road opened into a wider section where an old tungsten mining operation had left behind tailings and equipment, and enough flat ground that the pursuing trucks could run parallel again. And they did, accelerating past the F-250 on both sides simultaneously, in a pincer movement that Marcus recognized as a textbook intercept maneuver, the kind of thing law enforcement practiced for stopping fleeing vehicles without resorting to pit maneuvers or spike strips. The Ram pulled ahead and slowed, forcing Marcus to brake or ram it. And since ramming an official vehicle meant felony charges regardless of what else happened, Marcus chose braking, bringing the F-250 down to 30, then 20, then finally stopping when the Ram blocked the road completely, and the Silverado pulled alongside, boxing them in with professional efficiency that spoke to training or experience or both. Doors opened on both pursuing vehicles. Cole emerged from the Silverado wearing the same clothes from the confrontation at the claim, his shirt dusty and his expression carefully neutral, neither triumphant nor aggressive, but something that approximated concerned citizen reporting a crime. From the Ram came a man in his 40s wearing tan tactical pants and a polo shirt with a badge clipped to his belt, county sheriff markings visible on the badge even from 20 feet away, a service pistol in a hip holster, and the kind of body language that said authority and control were default settings. Marcus killed the F-250's engine and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they'd be visible, a gesture of non-aggression that might prevent escalation but probably wouldn't prevent arrest. "Hands on the dash," he told Elena. "Don't reach for anything. Don't make sudden movements. Let them approach. Let them talk first." The deputy approached the driver's side with his hand resting on his pistol grip, not drawn but ready, maintaining that tactical awareness that patrol officers develop from knowing traffic stops killed more cops than dramatic shootouts. He stopped 6 feet from Marcus's door, a safe reactionary gap, and made eye contact through the window in that evaluating way that meant he was assessing threat level and compliance indicators and whether this stop would end peacefully or violently. "Driver, turn off the vehicle," the deputy called, then registered that the engine was already off. "Step out of the truck. Slowly. Keep your hands visible." Marcus opened the door with his left hand, keeping his right hand raised and visible, moving with deliberate slowness that communicated cooperation, even as his mind ran calculations about how this would unfold and what options remained if cooperation didn't produce acceptable outcomes. He stepped down from the truck onto gravel that crunched under his boots, the sound loud in the evening quiet, everything feeling amplified and significant in the way moments did when they might determine whether you went home or went to jail. "Hands on the hood," the deputy instructed, and Marcus complied, assuming the position, legs spread and hands flat against the still warm metal the familiar geometry of being searched that he'd experienced from both sides during his years in law enforcement. The deputy conducted a professional pat-down that found the Glock on Marcus's hip immediately and removed it with practiced efficiency, ejecting the magazine and clearing the chamber before setting both on the truck's hood well away from Marcus's reach. "You armed?" the deputy asked Elena through the passenger window, and she shook her head, which was technically true since Marcus hadn't given her a weapon, despite the tactical situation probably warranting it. The deputy opened her door and had her step out, conducting a less thorough but still competent search that confirmed her unarmed status before positioning her next to Marcus with both of them facing the truck and not the deputy. Cole approached now that the deputy had secured the scene, maintaining a careful distance that suggested he understood the optics of appearing too close to law enforcement during what was supposed to be an objective investigation. "Deputy Rawlins," Cole said, addressing the officer with the kind of familiarity that came from multiple interactions over extended time, "these are the people I told you about. They showed up at my claim this morning. Threatened me. Shot at me. Tried to dig up my property without permission." Rawlins processed that information with a neutral expression that didn't indicate whether he believed Cole or was reserving judgment. A professional poker face that good cops maintained until evidence determined reality. "Sir, ma'am, I need to see identification. Driver's licenses. Registration. Insurance." Marcus provided his information from his wallet, moving slowly and announcing each motion before making it, the kind of careful protocol that prevented misunderstandings that ended with shots fired. Elena did the same, her hands still shaking from adrenaline and grief and the accumulated stress of the past hour, but managing to extract her license and hand it over without dropping it. Rawlins examined the documents with a flashlight, checking photos against faces and running the names against whatever mental database he maintained from years of patrol work and county familiarity. "Mr. Ryan, you're from Arizona. Ms. Navarro, Ohio. What brings you to Inyo County?" "My husband," Elena said before Marcus could formulate a strategic answer, her voice tight with emotion but clear enough to be understood. "David Navarro. He's been missing for 3 months. We tracked him to this area. To Mr. Brennan's mining claim." "Your husband is David Navarro," Rawlins repeated, writing notes on a pad he'd extracted from his cargo pocket. "And you believe he's connected to Mr. Brennan's claim? How?" "He was Cole's partner," Elena said, and the word came out with enough force that Rawlins's attention sharpened, the cop instinct recognizing that this was more than a simple trespassing situation. "They worked the claim together starting in March. David stopped communicating in June. We found his truck abandoned on the mountain. We found his wallet, his notebook, and we found his body, buried in a shallow grave at the camp. Shot in the back." Rawlins's expression flickered, professional neutrality cracking slightly to reveal concern or skepticism or calculation about whether this claim was credible or insane. "You found a body." "We documented it," Marcus said, jumping into the conversation before Elena could say something that would compromise their legal position. "Photos. Video. GPS coordinates. Uploaded to secure cloud storage. We were coming down to report it to law enforcement when Mr. Brennan intercepted us." "That's interesting," Rawlins said in a tone that suggested it was interesting in the same way suspicious was interesting, "because Mr. Brennan's story is that you two showed up at his claim making wild accusations, threatened him with a firearm, shot at him when he tried to defend himself, and started excavating his property without permission or warrant." "He killed my husband," Elena said, and tears were streaming down her face now, the control she'd maintained during the excavation finally breaking under the weight of official skepticism. "He shot David in the back and buried him and kept working the claim like nothing happened. We have proof. We have evidence. We documented everything." Rawlins shifted his weight, a subtle tell that meant he was recalculating the situation, reassessing who was victim and who was aggressor, trying to determine truth from competing narratives that couldn't both be accurate. "Mr. Brennan, you're claiming self-defense." "I'm claiming I defended my property against armed trespassers," Cole said, and his voice carried just the right mixture of aggrieved citizen and reasonable victim, the performance of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation in his mind during the drive down the mountain. "They showed up this morning with a rifle. Made accusations about my partner who left months ago. When I asked them to leave, they threatened me. The man, Ryan, fired at me. Hit my truck. I returned fire and retreated. I came to you immediately because that's what law-abiding citizens do when they're attacked." "Show me your firearm, Mr. Brennan," Rollins said, and Marcus noticed it wasn't a request but a command, the cop recognizing that if shots were fired, evidence would exist on the weapon itself. Slowly. 2 fingers. Set it on the ground. Cole complied, extracting the .45 from his hip holster with exaggerated care and setting it on the gravel, and Rollins picked it up and checked the magazine, his expression shifting slightly when he saw how many rounds were missing. "You fired 5 times. "I fired until they took cover and I could safely retreat. I didn't shoot to kill. I shot to defend myself and create distance." "And you, Mr. Ryan, you fired how many times?" "Once," Marcus said. "Warning shot. Aiming for his truck, not him. I was trying to disable his vehicle and prevent him from leaving before we could secure the crime scene and get law enforcement on site." "So you admit you fired first?" "I admit I fired at his truck after he drew on us while we were documenting a murder scene. Context matters. Sequence matters. We found a body. We were collecting evidence." He escalated to deadly force. Rollins absorbed that, processing competing claims and evaluating credibility through whatever internal algorithm 20 years of law enforcement had programmed into his threat assessment matrix. "Here's what's going to happen. You're both under arrest for the moment, pending investigation. Mr. Ryan, you're being detained for assault with a deadly weapon, reckless discharge of a firearm, and trespassing. Ms. Navarro, you're being detained as an accessory and for trespassing. Mr. Brennan, you're being detained for the same pending clarification of the self-defense claim. You're arresting me." Cole's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, surprise and indignation bleeding through the concerned citizen facade. "I'm the victim here. I'm the one who got shot at." "You're being detained," Rollins corrected, emphasizing the distinction. "Nobody's charged yet. But if there's a body on that claim, like Ms. Navarro claims, then we've got a crime scene that needs securing and evidence that needs processing, and I can't have any of you contaminating it or collaborating on stories while my investigators work. So everybody gets to spend the night in county holding until the sheriff and the detectives sort out who's telling the truth." He radioed for backup and a tow truck, speaking in the clipped professional code that law enforcement used to communicate efficiently, requesting additional units and crime scene techs, and probably a coroner or medical examiner to handle whatever remained of David Navarro's corpse. While he talked, Cole shot Marcus and Elena a look that carried implications and threats, a facial expression that said this wasn't over, that being arrested was a temporary inconvenience rather than justice, that he had resources and connections and confidence that the system would work in his favor. Marcus met Cole's eyes and held the contact, refusing to look away first, communicating through silence and eye contact that documentation existed, that evidence was preserved, that cloud storage meant Cole's story would have to account for digital proof that couldn't be disappeared or destroyed. Elena saw the exchange and understood what it meant, reached into her pocket to verify her phone was still there, the device that contained video of David's grave and GPS coordinates and timestamps that would either convict Cole or save him, depending on how thoroughly the investigation proceeded. Rollins cuffed all 3 of them with professional efficiency, metal restraints that clicked shut with sounds like deadbolts engaging, transforming them from citizens with rights into detainees with limitations. He loaded them into the ram's back seat, Cole on one side and Marcus and Elena on the other, close enough to hear each other breathe, but separated by enough space that physical violence would require obvious motion that Rollins could stop. The drive down the mountain took 40 minutes. Nobody speaking, tension thick enough that conversation would have required effort that nobody wanted to expend. Marcus used the time to inventory their legal position and evaluate outcomes, running scenarios about what evidence would surface during investigation, and whether the video Elena had recorded would be sufficient to shift Rollins's assessment from skeptical to convinced. Ridgecrest appeared as lights in the darkening valley, civilization announcing itself through electric illumination and the geometric patterns of streets that contrasted with the organic chaos of mountains and desert. Rollins drove directly to the Inyo County Sheriff's Station, a low concrete building that looked like every other government facility Marcus had ever seen, designed for function rather than aesthetics, built to withstand anything up to and including riots. The booking process was mechanical and impersonal. Photos and fingerprints and property inventories, phones and wallets and belts removed and cataloged in manila envelopes that would theoretically be returned when release came, but might also become evidence depending on what investigation revealed. Marcus watched Elena hand over her phone with visible reluctance, understanding that she was surrendering the only copy of documentation that proved Cole's guilt, trusting that law enforcement would access the video and act on it rather than letting it disappear into evidence storage where it might never be reviewed. They were separated after booking, Marcus and Elena, placed in different holding cells because protocol didn't allow opposite-sex prisoners to share space even when they were cooperating suspects rather than hardened criminals. Marcus ended up in a cell with two other men, both arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, both sleeping off their intoxication on concrete benches that were designed to be uncomfortable enough that nobody wanted to stay long. Elena was across the hallway, visible through small window when Marcus positioned himself correctly, her face pale and exhausted and marked by grief that had nowhere to go now that evidence had been collected and authority had taken control. She met his eyes through the windows and managed something that wasn't quite a smile, but conveyed recognition and shared experience, a moment of connection that said they'd done what they could, and now the system would either work or fail based on variables beyond their control. Marcus sat on the concrete bench and waited, because waiting was what you did in custody, waited for lawyers or arraignment or investigation to produce outcomes that would determine whether you left through the front door or the back door or not at all. He thought about David Navarro buried in Desert Grave, about Cole Brennan sitting in his own cell, probably confident that connections and money would extract him, about Elena transformed from teacher to widow to witness, about justice as concept versus justice as practice. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, and somewhere in the station evidence techs were probably accessing Elena's phone, viewing the video, seeing what Marcus and Elena had seen, building the case that would either put Cole Brennan in prison or prove insufficient to overcome reasonable doubt. Time would tell. It always did. Chapter 12. Morning came through high windows set into concrete walls, designed more for ventilation than illumination, the kind of architecture that told you about priorities and punishment through the simple geometry of restricted light. Marcus had slept in 3-hour increments on the concrete bench, his body automatically waking at intervals to assess threats and check positions, old habits from deployment cycles where sleep was tactical rather than restful, where staying alert meant staying alive even when circumstances suggested relative safety. The drunk and disorderly cases had been released around 3 a.m., bonded out or sobered up enough that the desk sergeant decided they weren't worth the paperwork of formal charges. That left Marcus alone in the cell, which meant space to think without distraction, time to evaluate their legal position, and calculate odds about how the next 48 hours would determine whether they left as free citizens or stayed as defendants in a murder investigation that had them positioned as suspects rather than witnesses. Elena was across the hallway, visible when Marcus positioned himself at the correct angle to see through the small window in his cell door and across to hers. She'd been awake most of the night. He could tell from the way she sat upright on her bench rather than lying down, maintaining a posture that suggested vigil or refusal to surrender to circumstances that insisted on treating her as criminal rather than victim. Their eyes met occasionally through the parallel windows, brief moments of connection that communicated shared experience without requiring words or gestures that might be monitored by cameras or guards. At 7:30, a detention officer brought breakfast, if you could call it that. Plastic tray with compartments holding scrambled eggs that looked like they'd been reconstituted from powder, white toast already cold and slightly damp, a small carton of orange juice that tasted like it had been mixed from concentrate using too much water. Marcus ate it anyway, because refusing food was pride, and pride didn't serve survival. Because you fueled your body regardless of whether the fuel was pleasant, because every calorie was resource that might matter later. At 8:15, Deputy Rollins appeared at Marcus's cell door, clipboard in hand, an expression revealing nothing about whether evidence had been reviewed or decisions had been made. "Mr. Ryan, you get your phone call now. One call. Keep it under 5 minutes. Follow me." Marcus stood and waited while Rollins unlocked the cell door, the magnetic lock disengaging with a metallic thunk that echoed down the hallway. Rollins led him to a small interview room with a table bolted to the floor and a phone sitting on the surface connected to a wall jack, the kind of setup designed to be monitored and recorded, privacy being a concept that didn't extend to detention facilities or criminal investigations. 5 minutes, Rollins repeated, starting a timer on his watch and standing by the door in that position guards adopted when they were simultaneously supervising and trying to pretend they weren't listening, which was fiction but polite fiction that everyone maintained. Make it count. Marcus sat and picked up the receiver, the plastic slightly greasy from hundreds of previous users, and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never used, a contact from another life that existed in the space between active duty and civilian existence, when he'd transitioned from military police to contract security and needed people who understood how systems worked from the inside. The phone rang 4 times before a voice answered, male and suspicious in that way that government employees sounded when unexpected calls came to direct lines instead of routing through official channels. Special Agent Cardenas. "Hector, it's Marcus Ryan." Marcus kept his voice low and even, aware that recordings would capture this conversation and potentially introduce it as evidence in whatever proceeding followed. "Arizona, 2019. You owe me a favor." A pause while Cardenas's memory processed the name and the context, connecting present to past through shared experience that created obligations between people who'd worked together in circumstances where trust mattered more than procedure. "Marcus. Jesus. I didn't expect to hear from you. You calling in the marker?" "I'm calling it in. I need FBI involvement in a murder investigation. Local law enforcement has jurisdiction but might be compromised. I need someone from the outside to verify evidence before it disappears or gets mishandled." "Where are you?" "Inyo County Sheriff's Detention, Ridgecrest, California. Arrested yesterday on assault and trespassing charges related to a mining claim in the Granite Mountains. But the real crime is the body we found. Shot in the back. Buried in a shallow grave. We documented everything before local deputies showed up and detained all parties pending investigation." "All parties" means you and the shooter. "Me, the victim's widow, and the man we believe killed him. Deputy detained everyone to sort it out, which is proper procedure, but the killer has local connections and probably money for lawyers, and I don't trust that evidence will be processed correctly without federal oversight." Cardenas was quiet for a moment, processing information and evaluating whether this was legitimate request or desperation call from someone whose judgment had been compromised by circumstances. What's the victim's name? David Navarro, 36. From Columbus, Ohio. Came out here in March to work a gold claim. Partnered with a man named Cole Brennan. Stopped communicating in June. Wife came looking for him. We found him yesterday. Single gunshot wound to the back. Buried at the claim site. And Brennan? Claims the victim left months ago. Claims we trespassed on his property and attacked him. Claims self-defense when we confronted him about the body. But we have video documentation. Photographs. GPS coordinates. Everything uploaded to secure cloud storage before we were arrested. The evidence is solid if someone actually examines it. More silence while Cardenas ran calculations about resources and jurisdiction and whether this situation warranted federal involvement in what appeared to be local homicide investigation. This Brennan character, he have a history. Unknown. But the man at the local trading post said Brennan's been through here multiple times over the years. Always with different partners. Partners who don't come back. That's a pattern worth investigating. That's a pattern that gets FBI attention, Cardenas agreed. And Marcus could hear the shift in his voice from skeptical to interested. The transition that happened when a case went from possible waste of time to legitimate criminal enterprise that crossed state lines and matched behavioral patterns that warranted federal resources. Give me the particulars. Full names. Badge number on the deputy, if you got it. Case number, if they've assigned one. Marcus provided information quickly, aware that his 5 minutes were running down, and Rollins would terminate the call when time expired regardless of whether the conversation was finished. He gave Cardenas everything that might help, the kind of detailed intelligence that made investigations move faster because someone on the inside had context and motivation and enough pieces of the puzzle that they could see the complete picture. I'll make calls, Cardenas said when Marcus finished the data dump. I'll contact the Inyo County Sheriff, request copies of evidence, offer federal resources for processing. If your documentation is as good as you say, and if this Brennan has the kind of history we suspect, I can fast-track a joint investigation that brings FBI into the mix. But Marcus, if this turns out to be you interfering in a legitimate self-defense situation because you got emotionally invested in a client's crusade, I can't protect you from the consequences. The evidence will speak for itself, Marcus said. We found a body. We documented a murder. That's not emotional investment. That's criminal investigation conducted by civilians because law enforcement wasn't involved yet. Once you see the video, you'll understand. I hope you're right. For your sake and the widow's. Give me 24 hours. I'll light fires. I'll make this a priority. But you need to sit tight and don't do anything that makes you look guiltier than you already do. No jailhouse heroics. No confrontations. Just wait. Waiting is what I'm good at, Marcus said, and the line disconnected as Rollins tapped his watch to signal that 5 minutes had expired and the conversation was over. Time being a resource that detention facilities measured in intervals that didn't allow for extensions or exceptions. Rollins escorted Marcus back to his cell, the walk down the hallway passing Elena's cell where she watched through her window with questions in her expression that Marcus answered with a small nod, a gesture that communicated success or at least possibility, that help was coming even if timing remained uncertain. The cell door locked behind him with the same metallic thunk, and Marcus resumed his position on the concrete bench, settling into the waiting that was now official strategy rather than passive endurance. 24 hours. That's what Cardenas had promised. One full rotation of the Earth before federal resources would engage with local investigation, and either validate their evidence or expose it as insufficient for prosecution. The morning stretched into afternoon, time moving with the distorted physics of custody where minutes felt like hours and hours felt like days, where nothing happened except meals delivered through slots and occasional guard patrols that checked cells without engaging prisoners in conversation. Marcus used the time to reconstruct events in his mind, building a narrative that would hold together under cross-examination, memorizing dates and times and sequences so that his testimony would be consistent and credible when the moment came to provide official statements. At 1400 hours by Marcus's watch, the detention area's routine was interrupted by movement and voices, the kind of purposeful activity that meant something was happening beyond the standard processing of drunks and domestic disturbances. Marcus heard Rollins talking to someone with authority, responding to questions with the deference that deputies showed to supervisors or investigators who outranked patrol officers in the law enforcement hierarchy. Then footsteps, multiple sets, approaching down the hallway with deliberate pace that suggested official business rather than routine inspection. Marcus stood as his cell door opened, revealing Rollins accompanied by two men in suits that looked federal rather than local, dark colors and conservative cuts, and badges clipped to belts in positions that announced law enforcement without requiring verbal introduction. "Mr. Ryan," Rollins said, his tone different now, more neutral and less certain than it had been during the arrest. "These are Special Agents cash.This and Morrison from the FBI. They have questions about your statement regarding David Navarro." cash.This was early 40s, Mexican-American, built like someone who'd played college football, and maintained the discipline through law enforcement career that required physical fitness and tactical capability. Morrison was older, 50-something, with gray hair, and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of interviewing suspects and witnesses and learning to distinguish truth from performance. "Special Agent cash.This," Marcus said, acknowledging the man whose number he'd called 6 hours ago, aware that Hector had moved faster than promised and delivered federal involvement on accelerated timeline. "I didn't expect to see you this soon." "Your information was compelling," cash.This said. "Compelling enough that I made some calls to Inyo County Sheriff's Department and offered federal resources for evidence processing. They were cooperative. We reviewed the video and photographs from Ms. Navarro's phone. We examined the crime scene documentation. We ran background checks on Cole Brennan." Morrison stepped forward, and his expression suggested that whatever they'd found in those background checks had been interesting enough to justify the trip from wherever the nearest FBI field office was located. "Mr. Brennan has been a person of interest in 3 previous missing person cases spanning the last 8 years. Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. All 3 cases involved prospecting partners who disappeared while working remote mining claims. No bodies were ever recovered. No prosecutions were filed due to insufficient evidence. But the pattern is unmistakable." "He's a serial killer," Marcus said, making the statement rather than the question, because the data supported that conclusion, and semantic precision mattered when building criminal cases. "He finds partners with money or equipment or claims. He uses them until the gold appears. Then he eliminates them and takes everything." "That's our working theory," cash.This confirmed. "And your documentation of David Navarro's body gives us the first physical evidence that confirms the pattern. We've coordinated with Inyo County Sheriff to secure the crime scene and conduct a proper forensic investigation. We've obtained warrants to search Brennan's property and vehicles. We're interviewing the trading post operator about his observations of Brennan's behavior over the years." "Cole's been detained." Elena's voice came from across the hallway, audible through the open cell door as she processed the information she was overhearing. "He's not going to walk away." Morrison turned toward her cell, his face softening slightly in that way that law enforcement developed when dealing with victims rather than suspects. "Ms. Navarro, Mr. Brennan is being held on suspicion of first-degree murder. Based on the evidence you and Mr. Ryan collected, we have probable cause for formal charges. The video you recorded was instrumental in establishing that the body existed and that it showed signs of homicide rather than accidental death. Cardenas motioned for both Marcus and Elena to be released, and Rollins unlocked the cells with the kind of resigned acceptance that came from recognizing when local jurisdiction was being superseded by federal authority. They gathered in the interview room, all 5 of them, with recording equipment activated and witness forms being prepared for signatures that would transform their verbal accounts into official sworn statements that could be introduced in court proceedings. The interview lasted 3 hours, Morrison and Cardenas walking them through every detail from the moment Elena arrived in Ridgecrest to the moment Rollins arrested them on the mountain road. They wanted times and dates and sequences, wanted GPS coordinates and photograph timestamps, wanted to establish chain of custody for evidence, and verify that the video hadn't been edited or manipulated to create false impressions. Marcus and Elena provided everything. The accumulated weight of a week's investigation, compressed into official statements that would become the foundation of the prosecution's case against Cole Brennan. They described finding the cairn, discovering the notebook, locating the grave, documenting the body, the confrontation with Cole, the firefight that followed. They explained their reasoning and their actions, justified their decisions to investigate rather than immediately reporting to local law enforcement, contextualized their choices within the framework of seeking truth when official channels weren't yet engaged. When the interview concluded, Morrison collected their signed statements and placed them in a folder that would become part of the case file, the official record of United States versus Brennan that would proceed through the federal court system with all the resources that designation implied. "You're free to go," Morrison said, the words sounding almost anticlimactic after everything that had preceded them. "We'll need you available for grand jury testimony and eventual trial, but for now you're released on your own recognizance. No charges will be filed related to the trespassing or assault allegations. The evidence supports your version of events." Cardenas handed Marcus a business card with contact information and case number written on the back. "Stay in touch. Keep your phones on. We'll be coordinating with prosecutors over the next few weeks as we build the case. This is going to be high profile, given Brennan's pattern and the multiple jurisdictions involved. Media will probably find you. My advice is to decline all interviews until after the trial concludes." They collected their property from the evidence locker. Phones and wallets and keys returned in manila envelopes that had protected them during custody, but now felt almost ceremonial in their presentation. Artifacts from an ordeal that was ending in one sense but just beginning in another. Elena checked her phone immediately, confirming that the video was still accessible, that cloud storage had preserved the documentation that would convict her husband's killer. Outside the sheriff's station, the afternoon sun was bright and warm after the fluorescent chill of detention, the kind of natural light that felt almost aggressive in its intensity after 18 hours of artificial illumination. Marcus's F-250 was parked in the impound lot, released along with their persons, the truck showing damage from the pursuit and escape but still functional enough to drive wherever they needed to go next. Elena stood beside the truck and looked at Marcus with an expression that contained exhaustion and relief, and something that might have been gratitude or might have been simple recognition that they'd survived an experience that could easily have ended differently. "Thank you," she said, "for calling your contact, for getting the FBI involved, for not giving up when we were arrested." "I didn't do it for thanks," Marcus said. "I did it because Cole needed to answer for what he did. Because David deserved justice, even if the system was slow to deliver it. Because you came 3,000 miles to find the truth, and you deserve to get it. What happens now? Now we wait again. The FBI builds their case. They gather evidence from the other disappearances. They interview witnesses. They prepare for trial. It could take months. maybe longer. Justice moves at its own pace, and federal courts aren't known for speed. And Cole. Cole sits in jail without bail because he's a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. He'll have lawyers and he'll fight, but the evidence you collected makes his defense very difficult. The video of David's body, the gunshot wound, the pattern of previous partners who disappeared. It all adds up to a narrative that prosecutors can sell to a jury. Elena leaned against the truck and closed her eyes, letting the sun warm her face after a night of concrete and fluorescent cold. I want to go back. To the claim. To where we found him. I want to. I don't know. Say goodbye properly. Without guns and deputies and everything else. The FBI has it secured as a crime scene. They won't let us access it until they've finished processing evidence. Could be weeks. Then I'll wait. Again. Seems like that's all I do anymore. Wait for calls. Wait for news. Wait for justice. Wait for permission to grieve. Marcus understood the frustration, the way that systems impose timelines on emotions that didn't follow schedules or respect procedures. You did everything right, he said. You found him. You documented what happened. You built the case that will put Cole away for the rest of his life. That's not waiting. That's action that produces results. The waiting comes after you've already won. She opened her eyes and managed something close to a smile, tired and worn but genuine. Did we win? We found the truth. Whether that's winning depends on what you were looking for. But Cole doesn't walk away. That's something. That's everything, she said. That's the difference between David being gone and being erased. Cole wanted to erase him. We didn't let him. They climbed into the F-250, and Marcus started the engine, the diesel catching with its familiar rumble that meant mobility and freedom and the ability to go wherever decisions led them. The road ahead was uncertain in many ways. Trials and testimony and media attention that would force them to relive these events repeatedly for the sake of legal process. But the immediate crisis was resolved. The body was found, the killer was caught, and the evidence was secure. Marcus drove north out of Ridgecrest, back toward the mountains where David Navarro was buried, and where the FBI was now measuring and photographing and collecting samples that would become exhibits in the case against Cole Brennan. The sun was dropping toward the western horizon again, another day ending in this desert that had witnessed so much and remembered nothing, indifferent to human dramas that played out against its unchanging landscape. In the passenger seat, Elena held David's belt in her lap and her phone in her hand, the physical artifacts of her search that had ended in discovery but not in the reunion she'd hoped for. She'd come to find her husband. She'd succeeded. Now she had to figure out how to live with what success meant when it came in the form of a grave instead of a homecoming. But that was tomorrow's problem. The end. Want more Noir? Let me send you a copy of Double Cross.